Hello everyone, I hope you're enjoying your summer thus far, and in order to start off the month of August, we've dropped a special bonus in our feeds today, and that's yet another special collaborative episode involving several true crime podcasts, which is titled Hot Pursuit, a Focus on Crime in the Summer Sun. It was organized by the True Crime Creepers and Coffee and Cases podcasts, and features over a dozen shows, including yours truly, and as the theme for this collaboration, each of us will be presenting a case which is associated with summertime. In total, this presentation is 3.5 hours long, and in case you're wondering, The Trail Went Cold is featured second, as just over 10 minutes in, I'll be discussing the unsolved 1973 disappearances of a teenage couple named Mitchell Weiser and Bonita Bickwit. But I hope you listen to the whole thing, as you'll be introduced to a number of new true crime podcasts, and you can find links for each of them in our show notes. Anyway, enjoy this special episode, as well as the rest of your summer.
Welcome to Hot Pursuit, a summer true crime collaboration where we dive deep into the world of true crime. I'm your host, Kristen from True Crime Creepers. My co-host, Allison from Coffee and Cases, and I are bringing you something extra special. We've gathered many incredible true crime podcasters to bring you a multi-part series that's all about the heat of the chase. We'll explore cases where justice was relentlessly pursued, delve into crimes that occurred during the scorching summer months, and highlight cold cases that desperately need some heating up.
From heart-pounding pursuits to stories of perseverance and determination, this collaborative effort aims to shed light on cases that have captivated the public's imagination and those that need your attention now more than ever. Each of these stories reminds us of the enduring quest for justice, no matter the season or the circumstances. So let's dive into these incredible tales of hot pursuit.
Kicking off our series, we have Annie and Johanna from Fresh Hell Podcast. Each week, they take their listeners on a historical journey through dark cases and through tales of the macabre in the hot pursuit of truth.
Hi, I'm Annie from the United States.
And I'm Johanna from Austria, and this is Fresh Hell Podcast, hosted by two friends who have never met in real life.
Fresh Hell is the podcast for you if you enjoy murder, mystery, and the macabre throughout history. We mostly cover old-timey cases, the paranormal, some cryptozoology, and of course some more lighthearted palate cleanser episodes sprinkled in every now and then.
We were so thrilled to be asked to participate in this Hot Pursuit collaboration about crimes that took place in the summertime. And so today we're diving into a tragic and very disturbing case from Austria. It's the story of Anna Augustin, a young maid who faced unimaginable abuse. And we covered this case more in depth in episode 141. So this is a condensed version.
This is a very upsetting crime. I remember when you told me about this, and I still think about this one every now and then. This is one that sort of gets lodged in the back of your brain for good.
Anna Augustin was born around 1920 in Mannersdorf in Burgenland, Austria. Burgenland is an area that became Austria's ninth and final state in 1921, and it was primarily agricultural, and many families lived in poverty. Very often, the children of those impoverished families would be sent away to work as maids or farmhands in other places. In 1934, at around 14 years old, Anna took a job as a maid for a wealthy couple, Josephine and Edmund Luna.
So she started working young, which was common back then. She was probably proud to be considered a grown-up and be able to help support the family with her additional income. And at first, everything seemed fine. Anna wrote letters home expressing her excitement about her new life. The Lunar children liked her, and she was seen as kind and hardworking. But soon, things took a dark turn. Neighbors began noticing changes in Anna. She grew thinner and more withdrawn, always accompanied by Josefina, who had a reputation for being stern. What nobody knew was behind the closed doors of the Lunar household. Anna was subjected to severe abuse.
She was frequently beaten with various objects, starved, and sometimes only fed potato peels, and even had her hair forcibly cut off by Josefine. Anna was forced to sleep in a cold stone cellar and wash with cold water. Her condition deteriorated rapidly. Unfortunately, no one raised concerns, as Anna was just a young maid and the Lunars were considered a respectable household.
By July of 1935, Anna had disappeared. Josefina claimed she sent Anna back to her family because she was lazy and immoral. But of course, Anna hadn't returned to her family. The truth was extremely sinister, and it would all be uncovered by mid-July. On July 17th, 1935, Edmund Lunar reported Josefina missing and revealed that their maid, Anna, was dead. Edmund told the police that Josefina had been acting strangely and had left home on July 15. When she didn't return, he found her passport and letters indicating Anna's death. The letters informed him that Anna Augustin was dead, but Josefina didn't explain what had happened to the girl. Edmund then climbed up the stairs to the attic, where the maid's room was located. On his way up, he could already smell a horrible scent of decay. When he entered the room, he found Anna's emaciated body on her cot. She must have been dead for quite some time already. The body looked almost mummified, and maggots were crawling all over the young girl's face. Edmund left the house in horror and immediately went to his lawyer, who convinced his client to go to the police.
When the police entered the maid's room, they were absolutely horrified about what they found. Anna Augustin must have been dead for at least 1 week already. Fluid had leaked out of her body onto the cot. The police had to cut the body off the bed to even be able to transport her. The terrible extent of Anna's injuries came to light during the examination. Her body showed many large bruises and burns. Her tongue was burned, probably with a hot iron poker, as were her genitals. She was extremely underweight, showing only a very low percentage of body fat. Even though it was not clear which of the injuries was the lethal one in the end, it was still glaringly obvious that this was not a natural death. When questioned about his wife, Edmund described Josefina as someone who had no friends or family who liked her, a sentiment shared by neighbors. The police quickly suspected her to be responsible for Anna's death. They also dug into her background and found a troubling history.
Josefina was born in 1893 and had a troubled childhood. Her father was an alcoholic mailman who died young, and her mother remarried and had 10 more children, of which only 6 survived. At 16, Josefina left home, working various jobs, often returning drunk. One of her roommates later remembered that one time she came home, lay down on the kitchen floor, and yelled, "I'm the Mona Lisa," over and over again. Friends from that time would later describe her as sensual, someone who loved to gloat, lies a lot, and was an imposter.
That's actually a direct quote from a newspaper article from the Neues Wiener Journal from 20th of September 1936, by the way. So to me, she sounds like these kind of people who always want to be more than they are. And the sensual part, well, that was code for she had a couple of relationships or affairs. She had a history of instability from a very early age. In 1913, she was involved with a man named Egon Tobner who died in World War I. Josefine manipulated Egon's mother into supporting her financially, moving in with her and treating her poorly until the woman's death under mysterious circumstances in 1926. Josefine was suspected but never charged. She met Edmund Lunar in 1916, married him in 1918 and continued her manipulative ways. They had 2 children and moved into a mansion in Vorderbrühl bei Mödling. That's just right outside of Vienna down north. And Anna hadn't been the only maid she had treated badly. Josefine did have a history of cruel treatments of maids, leading to multiple abuse cases before Anna's death. The investigators uncovered all this and were absolutely certain they needed to find and charge Josefine Lunar.
The police launched a manhunt. She was found only 1 day later on the 18th of July. An acquainted couple had recognized her walking around in the 23rd district. and they asked her to come and have lunch in a nearby restaurant. While the woman was distracting Josefina, the man went and called the police. When authorities arrived, Josefina looked very pale and only asked to be taken without causing a big sensation. She didn't resist her arrest and followed the police quietly. When asked about her whereabouts during the last 3 days, she stated that she had been wandering around aimlessly. All in all, she behaved rather confused and claimed she couldn't remember a lot of things, like when she was asked her age, she replied, "Very, very old." She was 43, by the way, so...
She was arrested and brought to trial. Josefina claimed that she was innocent, that Anna had suffered from a rare autoimmune disease that had ultimately caused her death. But that was of course not true. The trial revealed the full extent of Josefina's cruelty, as witnesses testified about the severe abuse Anna endured. Josefina's defense tried to paint Anna as problematic, but the evidence was overwhelming. The trial ended on 7th of October 1936. Josefina Luna was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death by hanging. When the verdict was announced, Josefina didn't show the tiniest sign of an emotion. She didn't even bat an eye.
Justice was served, and Anna Augustin's tragic death is a stark reminder of the hidden horrors that can happen behind closed doors. Her story underscores the importance of vigilance and compassion in protecting the vulnerable.
If you found this story compelling and are interested in learning about more historical crime cases, please subscribe to Fresh Hell Podcast on your podcast app.
And remember, if you're going through hell,
keep going. Tschüss.
Bye.
Up next, welcome Robin Warder from the Trail Went Cold podcast, whose quest for justice brings even the coldest cases back to life.
Hello, everyone. This is Robin Warder, host of the true crime podcast, The Trail Went Cold. If you haven't heard of my show, it's a weekly podcast which releases a new episode every Wednesday about a different cold case or unsolved mystery. The Trail Went Cold has been around for 8.5 years now, and we've covered over 400 unsolved murders and disappearances, but one missing persons case I have always been intrigued by and have yet to cover is the disappearance of a teenage couple named Mitchell Weiser and Bonita Bickwit, which took place over a half-century ago during the summer of 1973. I'm sure there are some aspects of the story which might seem surprising by today's standards, but you have to remember that the world was a much different place 51 years ago. Mitchell Weiser was 16 years old at the time, while his girlfriend, Bonita Bickwit, who went by the name Bonnie, was 15. They both hailed from Brooklyn, New York, and were considered to be very popular and intelligent teenagers who attended an alternative school for gifted, high-achieving students. They each had summer jobs, as Mitchell was employed as a photography assistant at Chelsea Photographers in Coney Island, while Bonnie traveled nearly 100 miles to the hamlet of Narrowsburg, located in the Catskills region of Sullivan County, where she found employment as a mother's helper at Camp Wilmette. The couple made plans to attend an outdoor rock music festival called Summer Jam at Watkins Glen, which would feature performances from such iconic groups as The Band, the Allman Brothers Band, and the Grateful Dead. The concert was scheduled to take place on July the 28th, and the plan was for Mitchell to meet Bonnie at Camp Wilmette, where they would proceed to hitchhike the 155-mile distance from Narrowsburg to Watkins Glen. Yeah, I know that these days, it is universally recognized that hitchhiking is a very dangerous form of travel, but it was much more common during the 1970s, even for teenagers like Mitchell and Bonnie. On July the 26th, Mitchell traveled by bus from New York City to Camp Wilmette and learned that Bonnie had just quit her job. She apparently had issues with the family she was babysitting for and had asked for time off to attend Summer Jam, but when they refused to comply with her requests, Bonnie decided to quit and said she would return after the festival to collect her clothing and final paycheck. The following day, Mitchell and Bonnie set out on their trip together, and a truck driver would later recall giving them a brief ride from the camp to Narrowsburg before they went their separate ways. The following day, Summer Jam took place at the Watkins Glen Grand Prix Raceway, but while around 150,000 tickets had been sold in advance, a lot more people showed up there than expected, and many of them essentially got to experience a free concert. There was so much chaos that a massive traffic jam took place in the area, with many of the attendees just abandoning their vehicles on the road and walking the rest of the way to the event. In total, it's estimated that 600,000 people attended Summer Jam, and the event wound up being featured in the Guinness Book of World Records as having the largest audience to ever attend a music festival, as it even beat out Woodstock. However, to this day, it's still not clear if Mitchell and Bonnie were among those 600,000 people. While Mitchell's family knew of his plans to attend Summer Jam, they assumed he was going to travel there via bus rather than hitchhiking. By contrast, Bonnie's family was completely unaware of her plans to attend the festival and realized something was amiss on July the 30th when they received a phone call informing them that Bonnie had left Camp Wellmet 3 days earlier and failed to return, even though she still needed to collect her clothing and final paycheck. That same day, Mitchell had a driver's lesson which he did not show up for, and he never returned to his job at Chelsea Photographers, even though he also left behind an uncashed paycheck. Now, if there's one common trait you'll find in missing persons cases from the 1970s involving teenagers, it's that it was often very difficult for their families to convince the police to take their disappearances seriously or launch an investigation, unless there was strong evidence of foul play. Otherwise, law enforcement's standard response was to simply write off missing teens as runaways. Not surprisingly, the same thing happened here when Mitchell and Bonnie's families attempted to report them missing to the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office, because even though they were technically last confirmed to be alive in Sullivan County, no one could be certain if they managed to hitchhike out of the area. It turned out that Mitchell and Bonnie had secretly exchanged wedding rings that summer, so the police pretty much believed that they had gone off and eloped together, or possibly even joined a commune or a cult. Since there wasn't much of an investigation, both teens' families published ads in a number of different newspapers urging Mitchell and Bonnie to call home if they were alive, and they also circulated thousands of missing persons flyers with the couple's photographs. For many years, there was virtually no evidence to work with, and even though there were reported sightings of the two missing teens throughout the U.S., none of them ever panned out. In 1987, Mitch's father, Sidney Weiser, would receive a collect phone call from a woman identifying herself as Bonnie. Sidney told the operator he would accept the charges, but after he was connected to the caller, she abruptly hung up and never called back. The case would fade into obscurity, but returned to the spotlight in the year 2000 when the New York Daily News ran an article about Mitchell and Bonnie's disappearances, and their story was also featured on an episode of the TV series Missing Persons. A 51-year-old Rhode Island resident named Alan Smith just happened to watch the episode, and after recognizing the couple's photographs, he soon came forward to the authorities with a surprising story. Smith claimed that during the summer of 1973, he attempted to hitchhike to Summer Jam at Watkins Glen, but the crowds there were so large that he never got anywhere near the event. When Smith attempted to hitchhike out of the area, he was picked up by an orange Volkswagen bus with Pennsylvania license plates. It was being driven by an unidentified man who had a teenage couple as passengers, and when Smith saw Mitchell and Bonnie's photographs on the Missing Persons episode, he became convinced it was them. While Smith said that the couple never shared their names, the girl apparently spoke about having worked at a summer camp. And when Smith described the couple's clothing, it seemed consistent with what Mitchell and Bonnie were last seen wearing. Since it was very hot at the time, the bus eventually came to a stop so that everyone could go swimming in the 444-mile-long Susquehanna River. However, shortly after the teenage girl entered the water, she found herself in trouble, so the teenage boy jumped in and attempted to save her. But it wasn't long before they were both swept away down the river by the current and disappeared, and this was the last time Smith ever saw them. Since Smith claimed he was under the influence of marijuana at the time and did not want to deal with law enforcement, he never attempted to report this incident to anyone, but he said that before they went their separate ways, the Volkswagen bus driver assured him that he would go to the nearest gas station to call the police. Well, needless to say, after all these years, no record could be found of any phone calls that were made to report the drowning of two teenagers in the Susquehanna River in New York State in July of 1973. And as far as I know, no unidentified John or Jane Does washed up in the area during this time period. Smith said that he did not recall the name of the driver, so he was never tracked down and questioned, and since he was unable to identify the specific stretch of river where Mitchell and Bonnie supposedly drowned, and no bodies were ever found, there was technically no corroborating evidence to support Smith's story. In spite of this, one of the detectives who heard Smith's story believed his account was credible, though opinions from the victim's loved ones were divided. While Bonnie's mother and sister were inclined to believe the drowning story, Mitch's family remained skeptical and wondered why Smith, who was an athletic Navy veteran, never made any attempt to jump into the river to save the drowning couple. But in Smith's defense, some of his friends recalled him talking about this drowning incident right after he returned from Summer Jam in 1973, so it did not appear that he suddenly decided to fabricate this story after watching the Missing Persons episode on TV 27 years later. Regardless of whether or not Smith's account is true, it at least helped bring some new attention to this case. Sadly, both Mitchell and Bonnie's parents are now deceased, but their surviving siblings and friends are still searching for answers about what happened to them. Last summer, to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the couple's disappearance, an article was published about their story in Rolling Stone, and it has also been featured on a number of true crime podcasts, including The Vanished. Since 5 decades have passed, and no concrete evidence has ever been found to indicate that Mitchell and Bonnie are still alive, I think we can discount the possibility that this 16-year-old and 15-year-old managed to run away and successfully start a new life together, as I'm sure they would have resurfaced or contacted someone by now. It seems very likely that something happened to the couple during their trip to Watkins Glen, but did they drown just like Alan Smith said? Or did they cross paths with the wrong person and become victims of foul play? In recent years, the authorities have investigated a few leads which involve Mitchell and Bonnie possibly being murdered, but have yet to find anything conclusive. Unless the remains turn up someday, we may never know the full truth about what happened, but if you happen to have any information about the disappearances of Mitchell Weiser and Bonita Bickwit, please contact the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office at 845-794-7100. That's 845-794-7100. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us for this special summer collaboration episode, and if you would like to check out The Trail Went Cold and listen to a lot more episodes about unsolved cold cases, please visit the website trailwentcold.com. That's trailwentcold.com. Have a great summer, everyone.
Lane from Suffer the Little Children is here next. She aims to heat things up in the cases of lives cut short, all while giving voices back to victims and their families.
Hi, everyone. Suffer the Little Children is the podcast giving voices back to the victims of child abuse murder and their families. I'm your host, Lane, and today I'll tell you an abridged version of a story I initially covered in 2020 in episode 33. This is the story of a happy, playful 10-year-old boy named Nakota Kelly, who had a megawatt smile and a talent for baseball. Unfortunately, it's also the story of Nakota's murder. In 2008, 22-year-old Haley Kelly found what she thought was the man of her dreams on a dating website. Miguel Nchama was charismatic, handsome, and sweet. On May 25, 2010, Nakota Blake Kelly was born weighing 7 pounds 10 ounces. At the time, Haley also had a 3.5-year-old daughter. It wasn't until Nakota was almost 2 years old that Haley discovered the man she loved was not who he said he was. Miguel Nchama was one of 5 names her son's father used over the years. He was born in Nigeria on March 11, 1983, with the name Ejike Ibe, although it seems he had it legally changed to Anthony Debaya at some point. According to a criminal complaint filed in August 2011, Anthony was charged with fraud, misuse of visa permits, misuse of Social Security number, and fraud with identification documents. He was ordered to be held in custody. He was not a citizen of the United States, and he possessed identification documents in the names of 3 other people. Authorities believed he was a citizen of Nigeria. Despite finding out that she was dating a con man, Haley still loved him, at least until he became more and more controlling, and she finally became fed up and broke up with him. After their breakup, Anthony talked down to her and insulted her, picking on her looks and her weight. In 2012, Anthony pleaded guilty to Social Security fraud, identity theft, and misusing documents to stay in the country, and was sentenced to 34 months in federal prison. Near the end of his sentence, a judge ordered him deported, but according to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Nigeria refused to take him back. The United States Supreme Court has ruled the government cannot imprison someone indefinitely who is in the country illegally in cases when it is unlikely that they will obtain the documents needed for deportation. Because Anthony could not secure proper travel documents from Nigeria, ICE officers released him in October 2014 on order of supervision. At this point, Anthony was free to walk the streets. His son, Nakota, was 4.5 years old. Nakota always seemed to have a smile on his face, even though he didn't have the easiest life. On top of having problems breathing while he slept, necessitating surgery in 2014, Nakota was also diagnosed with several other conditions throughout the years, including severe ADHD, sensory processing disorder, pervasive developmental disorder, a mild learning disability, and a speech impediment. He was, at least at one point, on medication for some of his conditions. According to statistics, children with mood, behavior, or learning difficulties are at a higher risk of parental abuse than neurotypical children. For about a year, Haley didn't hear from Anthony at all. When he did get in touch with her, he demanded a DNA test to prove Nakota's paternity. Then, in October 2016, Anthony took Haley to court for visitation with Nakota. At first, Nakota was excited to start seeing his dad. After Nakota's first overnight visit with his father on New Year's Day of 2017, Haley filed her first abuse allegation with Indiana's Department of Child Services, or DCS, saying Anthony gave Nakota a double dose of his ADHD medication. Anthony claimed it was a mistake, saying he thought he was supposed to give Nakota both pills at once instead of one each day of the visit. That allegation was determined to be unsubstantiated. The following month, Haley filed a second DCS complaint, saying Nakota had suffered bruises after Anthony dragged him down the stairs. In November of that year, Haley complained that Anthony hit Nakota so hard in the face that her son fell backward over a couch, landing on his back. In June 2018, she reported to DCS that Nakota was present when Anthony threatened to beat her after she confronted him about abusing Nakota. A month later, Haley filed a court motion asking for Nakota's visits with his father to be supervised, but the court ordered them to meet with a mediator instead. Haley ended up signing a mediation agreement that neither would withhold parenting time if they suspected abuse or other issues, and that they would let the court deal with it instead. Why did she sign that agreement? Haley's lawyer told her they didn't have enough evidence to convince the judge to change the visitation agreement because DCS unsubstantiated all of her complaints. Nakota even told a DCS caseworker himself that he didn't want to go with his abusive father anymore, saying Anthony hit him, smacked him, yelled in his face, and didn't feed him enough. At one point, Haley refused to send Nakota with Anthony, but the police showed up at her home in Wabash, Indiana, and threatened to arrest her if she didn't allow her son to go with his father. Out of options, Haley relented. She was doing everything she could to stop Nakota's unsupervised visits with Anthony, but no one listened to her. On July 14, 2020, 10-year-old Nakota made an alarming statement to Haley. Nakota was afraid to spend the weekend with Anthony because he knew his dad would be angry with him for hanging up when Nakota didn't want to speak to him. Haley immediately told a DCS caseworker that after being informed that he would be spending the weekend at his father's apartment in Indianapolis, Nakota replied, "Oh, I'm dead. Don't expect me to come home." When asked for clarification, Nakota told his mother, "My dad is going to kill me." DCS took no action to prevent the upcoming weekend visit, although they did open a case. Haley had no choice but to allow it, fearing she would be jailed if she didn't. She wouldn't be much help to Nakota or his older sister behind bars. A judge had ordered that Nakota's weekend visitations would begin at 6 p.m. on Fridays, but Nakota's final Little League baseball game of the season was scheduled for the evening of Friday, July 17th. It meant a lot to Nakota to be there, so despite Anthony's demands that she meet him for the custody transfer at 6 p.m., Haley brought Nakota to his father after the game was over. Anthony was furious that she was late and told Haley he would never cooperate with her again. The following day, at 7:36 p.m. on Saturday, July 18, 2020, Nakota spoke with his mom on the phone for the last time, telling Haley he had just eaten a couple of Lunchables and was watching YouTube. They went back and forth, as they always did, about who loved who more, and Haley told her son that she would see him tomorrow. About 2 hours later, Anthony's cousin in Texas called 911 and said he had received a text message and then a call from Anthony DeBaya. Anthony and this cousin hadn't spoken for nearly 20 years until they reconnected about a month before. The cousin told the dispatcher that Anthony, who was weeping, screamed over and over, "I just killed my son." Anthony asked for the cousin's address, but the cousin refused to give it to him. This apparently upset Anthony, and the cousin hung up and immediately called 911. Just after 10 p.m., Indianapolis police went to the apartment complex to perform a welfare check. Anthony's vehicle, a white Jeep Patriot, was parked in the parking lot. Officers knocked on the door of apartment E and heard someone moving around inside, but they received no answer. Feeling there was no reason to force entry, police left. On Sunday morning, July 19th, police received another report from a friend of Anthony's. The friend said Anthony called him that morning and confessed that he had used a plastic bag to suffocate Nakota to death, then took his son to the bathroom to make sure he was dead before dumping the body in an undisclosed location. When police arrived at the address again at around 11:45 a.m., Anthony's vehicle was no longer parked in the lot. This time, because of the second report, authorities were taking the situation seriously enough to deem it necessary to enter the apartment, which they did after obtaining a key from building management. Inside, they found neither Anthony nor Nakota. There was a small amount of blood in the apartment's entrance. In the bathroom, police found a large amount of blood splattered on the walls, floor, and ceiling. There was hair and brain matter on the bathroom floor. Based on the evidence inside the apartment, authorities immediately believed Nakota was dead. IMPD homicide detectives, child abuse detectives, the Indianapolis-Marion County Forensic Services Agency, and the Marion County coroner were summoned to the crime scene at Anthony DeBaya's apartment. Investigators obtained surveillance video in which they saw Anthony DeBaya making numerous trips from his apartment to his vehicle, placing items into the back of the vehicle with each trip. During one trip, he was seen placing a bag inside the complex's communal dumpster. Between 2:27 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. on July 19, 2020, Anthony's vehicle was seen leaving the parking lot and returning several times. Also on July 19th, Haley contacted the DCS caseworker again after she received a text message from Anthony at 2:01 p.m. reading, "Sometimes I hear voices. My son is in heaven." Haley refused to believe at the time that Nakota was dead. Even though she feared Anthony would abuse their son, she never thought he would kill Nakota. She reported the text message to DCS, who forwarded it to Indianapolis detectives. Investigators traced Anthony's cell phone location and ascertained that he was driving through Illinois toward the Missouri border. The same afternoon, Anthony was located and detained when the Missouri State Highway Patrol spotted him traveling alone in his white Jeep Patriot. IMPD detectives traveled to Missouri, but Anthony refused to give them a statement and was arrested. Police found blood in the back of his vehicle. Anthony was charged with murder in the presumed death of his 10-year-old son, Nakota. The Marion County Prosecutor's Office said a conviction in this case would result in either life without parole or the death penalty. Anthony was booked into the Marion County Jail, where he was held without bond. Over the next 3 years, Anthony's trial was scheduled and rescheduled over a dozen times. At long last, at a change of plea hearing in September 2023, Anthony changed his plea from not guilty to guilty but mentally ill. Thanks to a plea agreement he struck with the prosecution, Anthony admitted in court to killing his own son. At his sentencing hearing in October, Anthony was sentenced to 52 years in prison. Anthony DeBaya, now 41 years old, is currently serving his sentence at the Wabash Valley Correctional Facility in Carlisle, Indiana. His earliest possible release date is August 1, 2059. Disclosing the location of Nakota's remains was not stipulated in the plea agreement, and Anthony has never revealed that information. As of this recording, Nakota has not been located. Now, as I like to do at the end of all of my episodes, I want to tell you about who Nakota was. Nakota Blake Kelly was a happy, playful boy with an utterly charming smile, curly black hair, gorgeous brown eyes, and glasses. He played baseball for the Wabash Little League, and he also enjoyed bowling, football, and wrestling. He loved the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for most of his life. He also loved video games. One friend from church said about Nakota, "He had a smile you cannot forget. He was always dressed like a little gentleman. He was ornery and kept me on my toes. I loved his spunky yet sometimes bashful personality." Nakota's grandparents, Debbie and Phil, said Nakota loved Marvel superheroes and eating at McDonald's. Nakota and his older sister adored each other and enjoyed playing and spending time with each other. Nakota was, according to Haley, Mama's boy. Whenever she was sick, he refused to leave her side. Haley lovingly described Nakota as a protector who stood up to bullies despite his small stature. He loved reading but wasn't terribly fond of math, and he was sensitive to race issues, telling people his black and white cat named King was biracial like he was. Haley said Nakota also loved to cuddle. My sources for this story were the Indie Channel, Wish TV, Crime Watch 8, the Indie Star, Fox 59, Facebook, the Indiana Department of Correction website, Indiana's My Case portal, 13 WTHR, and the Chronicle Tribune. To learn more about Nakota and to hear the stories of other children murdered by their parents, guardians, or caretakers, check out Suffer the Little Children wherever you listen to podcasts.
Coming at you now is 911 dispatcher Brandon from Music City 911, who is known for his unyielding commitment to bringing justice to light. On his show, he explores real 911 calls and crimes from the perspective of a dispatcher himself.
Most crimes are reported on 911, especially in the hotter months of summer. Hot pursuits, they can happen at any time, all with their own twists and turns. But with this incident, the twists and turns are not something usual during a police pursuit.
Sheriff Dispatch, Michelle speaking. How may I help you?
Hey, Michelle. This is I'm calling from Store 200 at the Pilot Travel Center at Kramer Junction.
Hi.
Hey, I just called a little while ago and reported, the Amber Alert that was on for yesterday? With a little girl and her dad.
What's the address you called for?
The address is 5725 Highway 58.
1 second. Okay, I see your call. What's going on?
I'm sorry?
I see your call. What's going on?
I think it's the girl and I think it's the dad. They're going towards Barstow right now.
Okay.
I have a picture of the little girl that was in the front. She came in and got 2 sodas from me. And then number 8 and the guest came to me and told me it's the same Nissan Frontier and everything. They faked like they were going down south on the 395 and they turned around. And you can see him going in front of our cameras. And he said he ended up going east of 58 towards Barstow.
I'm going to have to back up a bit on this one since it started a pretty good ways before this call came in. Almost 2 years ago in September of 2022, 45-year-old Anthony Graziano was about a month into a separation that was leading to divorce with his wife, Tracy Martinez, who was also 45 years old. During the separation, they were living apart from each other. On September 26th, a little after 7:30 a.m., police got a report of shots fired at the Cypress Elementary School that is situated between Long Beach and Anaheim, just south of Los Angeles in California. After arriving at the scene, they discovered Tracy Martinez shot several times. She was still alive, but barely hanging on. Before being transported to a hospital, she told police she knew who shot her. Her husband, Anthony Graziano. After arriving at the hospital, doctors did everything they could, but Tracy died from those multiple gunshots. Back at the scene of the shooting, police started questioning those who were there and found out that not only did Anthony shoot Tracy, he likely shot at a van that had a man and a child inside. Keep in mind that this was right in the middle of the time to drop off kids at the school, so there were people everywhere. This could have been a lot worse than it was. After looking around for more evidence and asking more people for info, they found some. One parent had cell phone video of the suspect's vehicle, a white 2017 Nissan Frontier pickup truck with a toolbox and a black rack in the back. Another video was picked up from a security camera, and what was on that was pretty shocking. In the back seat of the truck was a teenage girl. That girl was Trace and Anthony's daughter, 15-year-old Savannah Graziano. She had witnessed her mother being killed. Believing Savannah was abducted and in a very dangerous situation, police immediately issued an Amber Alert. Anthony was described as either a male white or male Hispanic, around 5 foot 4 inches tall and weighing around 150 pounds. He was considered armed and dangerous. Savannah was described in the alert as being 5'2", with brown hair and eyes. The tag on the suspect vehicle was also listed as California tag 4305 G as in George 2. The alert was put out by California Highway Patrol in a number of counties, including San Bernardino, Kern, Riverside, and Los Angeles. The suspect was on the run, and everyone was looking for him. But especially, they were looking for Savannah. The 911 call we just heard was the sighting police needed. They got his location and the direction he was heading, probably out further in the desert towards Barstow. But one peculiar thing stuck out when police arrived to talk with the caller. They watched the security camera videos from inside the store. Savannah was casually walking around inside, alone, and walked to the counter and paid for 2 sodas. She didn't at all look distressed. Just a few minutes after the 911 came in, police spot a white Nissan Frontier running at a high rate of speed on Highway 58, then exited to get onto Interstate 15.
Hey, sir, are you approaching Linwood?
I'm sorry, tonight?
Are you approaching the Linwood exit?
Yeah, that's a firm.
Yeah, there's a white pickup truck probably doing 100 miles an hour east.
Yeah, that's the one I'm trying to catch up to. It's Nissan Frontier.
Hey, Kimmy, step it up. He's going to be about a half mile in front of you.
Sam 1, number 3 lane, straddling number 4, still trying to catch up to it. Coming up on OCD. And speeds are over 113. And Sam 1, if I could get a CHP unit, maybe has a charger to keep up to them.
All right, copy. They were advised. They didn't give me their locations on where they were.
When officers finally catch up to the white Nissan Frontier, something is put out over the radio no dispatcher likes hearing.
Shots fired, shots fired.
I copy. Shots fired.
Taking rounds. Shots fired. Oh, shots fired.
I copy. Taking rounds.
Still northbound, number 1. Watch out, watch out, watch out. K9, are you okay? I got to check on K9. He's off in the desert. Advise your status. Number 1 lane, still northbound. Correction, southbound.
K95, shots fired. Code 4.
Give me an airship and some additional units. Still southbound, number 1 lane.
Shots were being taken from inside the truck at pursuing deputies, and they were very accurate for the speed that was being driven. I've watched dozens of videos of suspects shooting at pursuing officers, and their rounds very rarely find their mark. This time, more than one police vehicle was hit, both of them several times, one of the officers inside taking shrapnel from one of the bullets. California Highway Patrol and San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department both had helicopters up and were requested to where the pursuit was happening. It took a little bit for them to get there, but did manage to get overhead and keep the truck in sight. The pursuit continues with the CHP helicopter overhead. The next clip is pretty hectic and difficult to hear, being that they have to monitor more than one radio channel at a time.
So they are in pursuit of
18 day before, were they getting shot with a rifle or a handgun?
So we're looking at that white guy. White truck, right, number 2 lane. 2 lane. Copy. We're 10-8. Advise our units to stay out of it. And last requested
right shoulder, passing the car carrier. Okay, you got it?
Hey, Sergeant, you guys want us to try shutting down the freeway? 15 south over by 11.
Just slow down here.
I'm going to concentrate
on the perimeter
on the shoulder again.
And just be careful, keep your head down.
Information for students. Report a shot to Sergeant 15. Alpha Drive.
We'll wait for him to see if he's committed southbound still.
You need the binos, Jeremy?
Let them know I'm
ICS volume.
If you can, let them know I'm recording.
Ridgeville H82.
Further the station KB 46. Go ahead.
Ridgeville H82, we're overhead. We have the camera on the suspect. We're recording audio and video.
And one on the camera on the suspect, recording audio and video.
Oh wait, coming up. He's going to shoulder.
He's coming up to the shoulder for the suspect.
Hey, bye.
Okay. Where are we at here?
Dale. Passing Dale.
Tension is already at a crazy level. A pursuit of a father suspected of killing his wife, traveling with a possible abducted teen at speeds over 110 miles an hour, shots being fired at the police, and hitting their mark. But the next bit of info relayed from both the ground units and the helicopter is both crucial and confusing.
Trailing over the overpass a half mile north of North Stoddard.
Suspect vehicle southbound passing North Stoddard now.
H82, number 1 lane, crossing over North Stoddard.
Team Paul 24, suspect vehicles in the number 1 lane, southbound 15, just fired a shot out the passenger window.
And we're getting...
Still shooting, he's still firing.
Actively firing out of the driver's side window.
Officers on the ground pursuing the white truck reported that shots were being fired out of the passenger window, with an air unit directly overhead advising that there were more shots coming from the driver's side. Unless this 5'4" tall suspect has the longest arms ever, I would believe it would be nearly impossible for him to be firing shots out of the passenger side window at police cars while they were traveling behind him, let alone do so with any accuracy while he was driving. As shots were being fired, a citizen in a vehicle captured some of the rounds being popped off on his dash cam. After the entire incident was over, the driver of the vehicle with the dash cam was interviewed by police, asking what he saw.
I flipped the video, and then that's when I caught the back end of him. And then I didn't expect the gun to pop out, shooting at me or at the cops. But it kind of looked like he was aiming at me. I mean, I don't know.
What part of the car did you see the gun come out of?
The passenger, right at the passenger side, right here, right out the side. It was just leaning out, just open fire.
And was it the driver or was it someone else in the car?
It must have been someone else because someone was still driving the truck.
Confirmed by deputies on the ground and this person that shots were being fired from the passenger side. Just seconds after those, the air unit reports shots being fired out of the driver's side. Authorities are still investigating this bit and haven't put out anything official on it yet, but it seems that 15-year-old Savannah may have been helping her dad shoot at police. That would explain how the shots being fired were hitting their target so easily. As I said before, pretty difficult to hit a moving police car from a vehicle going over 100 miles an hour while driving. The pursuit continues, approaching the Main Street exit of Interstate 15, approaching Victorville, California.
42, just be advised the traffic's coming to a dead stop up here. There's going to be way too much backdrop for us to engage if he does end up exiting and making contact with you guys. If he gets in the desert. Hey, both like you, I got y'all. He's leaving and then the traffic actually firing. Okay, he's just out. He pulls off. He's making a U-turn. Left orbit.
He's exiting at main, but he's using the on-ramp to exit no wrong way.
Watch these deputies. Hey, deputies, he's coming right at you on the exit.
Hey, you guys, he's going to lose control here as he goes up that embankment. Do we have units on Bear Valley?
He's stalling out. All right, dude. Get the 140, dude.
Everybody's got a rifle.
Let me know when open door.
You're clear. I'm going to be said that. He's on fire.
Units back up. Take some cover. We have 0 backdrop on the southbound lanes. Take your cover. Put out that shots are being fired. Shots are fired. Continue to shoot at the deputy. Girls out. All right, girls out, guys. Female Juvie is out. She's out on the passenger side. Does anyone else have eyes in the vehicle to see if we have any other passengers inside? Oh, no. You guys watch your backdrop. You guys on the exit, watch your backdrop for cross freeway traffic. Watch your crossfire, guys.
The white truck stopped just past the Main Street exit and then started going the wrong way up the entrance ramp. When Anthony saw police awaiting him there, he tried to go up a steep dirt and grass embankment to get around the police. The truck lost traction and he didn't make it all the way up the hill. He went backwards, back down towards the interstate where more shots were fired from inside the truck. Officers returned fire. In the middle of all that, the 15-year-old passenger gets out of the truck. While officers there didn't have body-worn cameras, at least one officer was wearing what's called a belt recorder, which is an audio recorder that's attached to his belt. Audio from the massive shootout was captured, starting just before Savannah got out of the truck. With all that was going on, it was difficult to tell what was happening. The officer was calling Savannah over to him, trying to get her out of the main area where the shots were being fired, which was coming from different sides of the truck, both on the entrance ramp and from the interstate. She's seen from video from the helicopter getting out of the vehicle, wearing tactical gear and a helmet, walking a few feet from the truck, then laying down. She then gets up again and starts walking towards the officer, where she then falls to the ground. She had been shot. Early in the investigation, it wasn't certain if her dad had shot her or if it was the police. Recently, police have said that she was struck from one of their own guns. What's still under investigation is if she was caught by one or more poorly aimed bullets, or if she was directly fired upon because it looked as if she was advancing towards the officers. At this point, all the firing had ceased, and officers approached the truck as well as Savannah. Anthony Graziano was declared deceased at the scene, having been shot multiple times. Savannah was rushed to a local hospital, where she also later passed. As I've said before, even though this all happened over a year and a half ago, the entire incident is still under investigation. Thanks for listening to this clip of Music City 911. If you'd like to hear more of this, it's a portion of the episode called High Speed Pursuits. Listen to that or any other of Music City 911's more than 200 episodes. For Music City 911, I'm Brandon, and y'all have a good one.
Welcome Nina from Already Gone podcast, whose fiery determination makes her a force to be reckoned with in the world of true crime.
It's a sunny Saturday afternoon. You hear a commotion in your yard. Then you hear gunfire, and you look out the front door to see a woman covered in blood. You run to her, and she's dying right in front of you. This isn't a creepy Halloween tale. This is the true story of the murder of Ali Brugger. Alexandra Brugger, the only child of Franz and Nikki Brugger, was born November 9, 1984. As an adult, Ali stood only 4 foot 9 inches tall, and she weighed less than 100 pounds. Her parents said she was small in stature but mighty in presence. She was a graduate of Holly High School, where she was the editor of the school paper and graduated with honors. In the summer of 2016, 31-year-old Ali was working on her master's degree in creative writing, and she was employed as a nurse at a hospital in Novi, Michigan. Some would say that writing was her love and nursing was her job. An avid runner, Ali regularly went out for 10-mile runs, and she followed the same route on Fish Lake Road in Rose Township. Well, she ran that nearly every day for weeks. One sunny Saturday in July of 2016, someone decided to take aim at her with a shotgun. They fired 4 shots. Ali, mortally wounded, collapsed on the lawn in front of a house. The homeowner called 911 for help, and then he rendered first aid. He was trying to stop the bleeding and trying to comfort her, but Ali didn't survive. Who would want to kill Ali Brugger, and why? Investigators scoured the scene, and reports say they found 4 shotgun casings near her body. While 4 shots were fired, only 1 hit its mark, and it was enough to kill Ali Brugger. Sadly, there isn't a lot of evidence or clues for investigators to follow. There were reports of a vehicle seen in the area, a white or light-colored sedan racing up Fish Lake Road around the time of the shooting. Without much in the way of motive, police had to look at the people closest to her. They turned their attention to her parents and her boyfriend. And listeners, I feel terrible for her parents. Their only child is gunned down in broad daylight, and they are investigated. Could they be responsible for her murder? In time, investigators were able to clear Ali's parents. They are no longer considered suspects in the case. And this leaves many people looking at Ali's boyfriend, a guy she met while working at the hospital in Novi, Weston Sutherland. Sutherland, an Army veteran who served as a combat medic, he says he was at home, asleep, by himself with his phone turned off at the time Ali was murdered. And I'm wondering, was Wes still her boyfriend? This is up for debate, because while he and Ali had lived together for about 2 years, Ali moved back home in the spring of 2016 and was residing with her parents at the time of the murder. Early in the investigation, police focused on Ali's father, Franz Brugger, a Vietnam veteran, and Wes Sutherland, her former boyfriend. Each man was issued a polygraph. Multiple news agencies reported that Wes Sutherland failed a polygraph related to Ali's murder. And if you're wondering what led to the breakup between Wes and Ali, the answer depends on who you ask. Wes has said that Ali was in a hurry to get married while he was not. He wanted to finish nursing school. Ali's friends say that she moved out after finding Wes's profile on a dating website. And whatever the reason for the breakup, the relationship appeared to be over by July of 2016. In fact, the relationship was so over that Ali's mother said her daughter had planned to visit to Florida in August of 2016. Ali was going to visit a guy that she'd dated previously. Sounds to me like Ali had already moved on. So, who shot Ali Brugger in broad daylight on July 30th of 2016? Was this a random killing? Could Ali have been involved in a road rage incident? Or was she tracked down by someone that she knew? It's been 4 long years and we are still looking for answers. Ali Brugger left behind her parents, many close friends, and her beloved dog, Zeus. There are multiple rewards available in this case. If you have information about the murder of Allie Brugger, you can leave an anonymous tip with Crime Stoppers of Michigan at 1-800-773-2587 or contact the Michigan State Police. I'm Nina Instead, host of the Already Gone podcast.
Next on our roster, we have the hosts from Sirens, a Southern true crime podcast, who bring a blazing intensity to every story they cover.
I'm Raven Rollins, and this is my Southern True Crime podcast where I discuss cases from my former hometown. Ada, Oklahoma paints itself as an average community, but its history of murder and corruption runs deeper than any story has ever told. You'll hear plenty of special guests, including authors and experts in their fields, who visit with me on each episode, as well as other cases in the southern states. With notorious and unknown cases alike, every victim sees the light on my show. This is Sirens, a true crime podcast. A life might end, but sometimes their case lives forever. Charlie Donnelly, the girl who was taken. In 1995, the movie Seven with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman was released. Top charting songs that year were Gangsta's Paradise by Coolio, Waterfalls by TLC, as well as Kiss from a Rose. On April 19th, 1995, Timothy McVeigh set off a bomb at the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, killing 168 people, including 8 federal marshals and 19 children. 680 others are wounded. For more information on that case, please check out our 3-part miniseries, Up in Smoke, where we discuss the bombing in detail as well as the events leading up to it, like the siege at Waco. 1995 was a historical year with white Broncos and even more tragedy. But before the year begins, we travel back to my hometown of Ada, Oklahoma, where 15-year-old Daniel Furr leaves home for the last time. Join me as I discuss this case with my co-host, Professor Amanda McNeely, as well as Daniel's mother and sister, Gail and Chelsea.
I am Chelsea. I am Daniel's little sister, and we were 7 years apart. I was 8 years old when my brother was killed. It wasn't until after I graduated high school and pursued criminal justice that I started digging into my brother's case myself and really started investigating and looking at his case. Even though I was really young when Daniel was killed, I still remember him as being the pesky older brother, like chasing us around the house and with a purse strap and, you know, trying to attack us and being the ornery big brother. And so he was the typical big brother picking on us little kids. So
I'm Gail Whitson. I'm Daniel's mother. I had Daniel when I was a senior in high school.
Oh. You were a baby.
I was a baby. Me and Grant Daniel kind of grew up together.
Aww.
Daniel was a very fun young kid, never gave me no trouble up until about a year before his death is when he started like hanging with the wrong crowd, getting with the wrong people. And at that point, I had become a single mother, and I had 3 other children. So I was a single mom of 4 kids. And it was difficult. It was difficult times. Like I said, me and Daniel kind of grew up together. He loved animals. He had a newspaper route. And when he'd go do his newspaper route, when he'd come back, he'd have like 10 dogs following him. I'd be like, where'd all these dogs come from? I petted them, and they followed me home. So then he'd have to go back around and take every dog back home.
We did adopt one and named it Bo.
Yes, he had one stinky old dog named Bo.
Stinky old dog.
Oh, stinky. It's bad. But he loved Bo, and Bo loved him. Yeah, there's a little creek just probably about 10 blocks from our house. And he'd go down there with his little Boy Scout camping thing, and he'd catch crawdads and cook them.
Did he eat them?
Yes.
Oh.
But he liked to be outside. He liked Boy Scouts. He liked to do outdoor stuff, camping.
In 1994, Daniel began hanging out with a bad crowd.
He often disappears for days or weeks on end and informs his mother, Gail, that he has joined a gang called Crips 8-Ball. He will not disclose member names to Gail other than M.H., whom Daniel is supposedly selling drugs for at the time, and one other member. Daniel tends to get into a lot of trouble around this time, and in November of 1994, he enters Willowview Juvenile Center. Daniel begins receiving death threats, telling Gail that, quote, they showed up with a message that if he talked, he would be killed, end quote. Daniel's stay in Willowview is 30 days long.
Once he went up to the placement where he was, supposed to go, he said after 30 days, he started telling me, he said, I just wanted to see if I could do it. And they said they took him to a place and told him he had to steal a car, and then he had to run down what they call the gauntlet, where you run down and they beat you as you run through it. And he goes, I did it. But after he came to his senses and was in treatment for a while, he said, this is scary. They've came to my window and told me if I said anything that, because I placed him up in Oklahoma City. And that's where he supposedly got jumped into the gang. And he was 14. That was right before he turned 15. He said they actually came to the window of his room and through the window told him. And that was just days after.
In June of 1995, a childhood friend of Daniel, Will Call the Fourth Scout, tells me that he spoke with Daniel around this time. He says that Daniel told him that he thought he had made a group of guys very upset with him and they were making threats, but he wasn't too worried about it. The friend states that Daniel was actually in really good spirits and told him that he was happy and had been doing well. We jump to July 6th, 1995. Daniel was seen by Gail that morning. He was also seen at his grandmother's house that day. This is the day that Daniel and his father Harvey get into a fight. Daniel leaves Harvey's house, and this is the last time Harvey sees him alive.
So my dad was out of town or out of state. While he was gone, Daniel was to stay with my mom. Daniel had broken the house and stolen some items from my dad. Upset my dad that he had broken and stolen something from him. He did confront Daniel about it, and they had gotten into an argument, and so then my dad left. And the bad thing about that is that's something my dad had always had to live with. He hated that was the last thing he said to his son. The words got heated or whatever. A few days later, he loses Daniel, and you can't ever take that back. And so I know throughout the years after that, my dad battled a lot of depression and blamed himself. So that really, really was hard.
I went through his room and I found some money. I found like $85 that was stashed in his mattress. The day that he left, we'll put it that way, I confronted him, and then I finally said, I got it. And if you will tell me where you got this, I will give it right back. He said, just give my money, Mom. We got a big fight. So the last time I ever talked to my son, too, it was a big fight. And he walked down the street and away. And that was my last words with him, too. So I lived with a lot of regret on that, too.
A witness states that Anthony Taylor and his crew showed up at a friend's house and invited them to a party at the quarry later that night. According to authorities, it is believed that this night, July 7th, 1995, is the night Daniel is murdered, either late that night or early into the 8th at this party. From statements to police, we gather that there could have been around a dozen possible witnesses to Daniel's murder that night, all underage kids he went to school with, or, quote, gang members. However, on July 8th, a girl we'll call MC says that LM, who was Anthony Taylor's girlfriend at the time, told her that she saw Daniel around 5:30 p.m. on the 8th. She does not say where, and I do not have an interview with the police from her. On July 11th, 1995, at 5:55 p.m., a 911 call came into the Ada Police Dispatch from Pastor Bill Galbraith. Bill, at the time, was the pastor for the First Presbyterian Church in Ada and the scout troop leader for Troop 9. He informed dispatch that several Boy Scouts from his troop, which was also Daniel's troop, had reported to him that they had found a body at the west side of the old brick plant, or quarry, just east of the church near the rock cliffs. Daniel was 5'10" and around 150 pounds. So reports of the body being 6 feet tall, weighing 160 pounds with long black hair and no facial hair. Age is approximated at 25 years old. And at the bottom, other descriptors are recorded, with height being 5'4", or 64 inches, and weight is noted at 92.5 pounds, along with the age of 15 and the race of white. It also says his hair is brown. These two descriptors are both on the same report, one at the top, one at the bottom.
I think this is the important part for everybody to realize why we had so much doubt.
I got an autopsy before the sheriff did. I had one in hand. I had somebody waiting up there at the ME's office for it. And it said 5'4". That's when I started questioning. And I saw a picture of the body, and the hair went along the shoulder to the end. And I said, just explain this long black hair to me.
It seems that the body was found in the active decay stage, near the end of decomposition, with only advanced decay or skeletonization remaining, which would take around a month, even in the heat. So the ME did not note what stages the maggots were in, nor their shape, size, or color. Maggots can be present at any stage, but these factors can tell us how long they have been present. Since these things were not recorded, we cannot use them for etymology purposes.
I questioned the medical examiner on that because I had took homicide investigation courses, just got out of them, and I said, you put the day of death, the day you found the body. He said, how else are we going to know? I said, the gestation of the maggots. And he said, we don't do that. For a homicide investigation, you need to know the time of death. I had questions, I had valid questions, and they would just tell me I was in denial.
With all of this information, our team believes the body could have been dead for at least 2 weeks to a month, with no blood present at the scene other than one small leaf, and it's a suspected stabbing. We believe that there's a good chance that the body was killed somewhere else and then placed at this scene. This would also explain why, if the body was older than 2 weeks, no one found it in this spot prior, as we know that the Scouts regularly meet at the church every Tuesday and played around this spot each week, yet did not witness the body there in previous weeks. In August of 1996, Gail speaks with Daniel's dentist, Dr. Clark. Dr. Clark didn't believe that they could have matched ID with the records that he provided. He stated that an x-ray had not been done of Daniel's teeth since 1991, when Daniel was 11 years old. He said he would have lost teeth, and new ones would have grown in, so it would be unlikely that an ID could be made from them. Those x-rays from 1991 were the ones sent to the medical examiner's odontologist and used in the comparison and eventual ID of the body as Daniel.
Clearly, the x-rays that were sent from Daniel's dentist was done when Daniel was 11 years old. There's a huge gap in between those times.
We do have the official reports for that comparison. It's very light, and we agree. It seems unlikely a match could have been made from them. July of 2006. Daniel's family does a news story about possible exhumation of the body to test it to find out if it really was Daniel. The ME stated after it aired that they had a tissue sample from the body. The family is told they will need to obtain a court order for the samples. In January of 2007, the family calls the Texas lab to see how the testing is coming along. They are told then that they never received the samples from the medical examiner's office for comparison.
So I called the ME's office and asked them, and they said, it's too decomposed. I said, I don't care. It belongs to me now. I have a court order. Will you please send it to my lab? And they can determine how decomposed it is. And they said, no, you'll have to get another court order. And I was just, every time they did that to me, it knocked the breath out of me. They just kept knocking me off my feet.
family requested another court order to release the sample to the lab anyway. While they are waiting on this second court order, and 6 months later, Joe Glover finds samples from blood from the body in the basement of the courthouse in Ada, labeled as Daniel Furr. It is sealed in an evidence bag with a sample of DNA, a leaf with blood, and hair samples. The DNA and hair are sent to the lab and tested against Gail. That sample was confirmed to be Daniel's DNA. But where is the chain of custody for these samples? Why were they stored in the courthouse basement instead of the medical examiner's office or an official evidence locker? How did they have these samples after the medical examiner themselves stated that their samples were not viable and had no other samples? Was the body found at the quarry misidentified due to an overwhelmed system in the months after the Oklahoma City bombing? Why did the medical examiner report one physical finding of the body only to change it later? Why has the autopsy report been left pending for 28 years? To hear our full episode on Daniel's case, find the Sirens podcast streaming wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find Daniel's case in our new true crime book, Sins of the South, a true crime case collection to advocate for, anywhere you get your books online.
Don't let Daniel be forgotten. Don't let his case grow colder.
Get ready for Everything Scary podcast, whose stories of anything under the umbrella of fear are as captivating and humorous as they are well-researched.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. So here's the deal. We're going to record a super short episode because we were so honored to have been asked to participate with a bunch of other podcasts.
Nice.
We're all going to share about a 15-minute story. And that way different listeners can listen to different pods. And
Nice.
If you like the pod that you listen to, then jump on in.
What kind of podcast? Any wrestling or it's all true crime?
It's definitely all true crime.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
no,
Just you gotta ask.
It's not wrestling.
I'll be like, there's no dumb questions.
Yeah,
But the look
well,
on your
that one
face
was.
implies there may be
There
one or
might
two.
And I have to apologize beforehand because brevity, not where I shine.
Okay.
We understandably can't exceed 15 minutes because, everybody's got to get a chance.
Oh, right.
And this is a huge case that I'm doing. So I will be covering it in depth on our pod
Okay.
at some time in the near future because it's fresh on my brain now.
Mm-hmm.
But because I am also going to be leaving out a bunch of important details, we're just going to get like the kind of shell of the case so that you
Okay.
understand.
Cole's Notes. I don't know if that's a reference that
Yeah.
Americans get.
Yeah.
Cliff Notes, probably.
And so today we're going to be telling the case of the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. This takes place just outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I have to say super quickly, Hanson's from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm going to leave it at that because I only have 15 minutes, but I had to say it. And I love Hanson. So the theme that we're supposed to go with is like summer crimes. This is a camp crime that takes place at the beginning of summer. It was actually June 12th of 1977. 100 to 150 Girl Scouts loaded onto the buses, and they were headed to Camp Scott, which was about 2 miles south of Locust Grove, Oklahoma, and Mays County. The camp had been open for 49 years, and one of the little girls that was headed to camp was 8-year-old Lori Farmer. Her parents were Sherry and Bo, and they said that it really kicked in how nervous they were to send their oldest child to camp when they watched her load onto the Greyhound bus.
That's all the
And-
reality just kind of.
Yes.
Wait.
Yeah. No, come back.
Yeah,
But she's
so
also 8.
she's still a
baby. She is a baby.
Yeah.
But I mean, the 70s, I'm sure, was a different time. Like, we look back on just the 80s and we think about like latchkey kids and stuff. And we're like, what the fuck were these parents thinking? I had a patient yesterday, Matt.
Yeah.
This is hand to God.
Yeah.
Her brother accidentally shot her with a shotgun when she was 11 and he was 12. Anyways, we only have 15 minutes, so let that sit with you.
I mean, our American listeners will be like, okay, what, you have a nice Tuesday story? That's nothing.
So, Sherry would say that she was worrying the entire time that the bus was on the road that they were going to get into a wreck. So, like, by the time that enough time had passed and they hadn't heard anything about a bus getting into a wreck, she was like, all right, great. Breathed a sigh of relief and then just was like, Lori's going to have an amazing time.
All right.
Another little girl was 10-year-old Denise Milner. Denise did not want to go to camp at all.
I hear you, Denise.
She was really excited to go at the beginning, but two of her friends were also planning on going, and then they kind of canceled last minute. And so she was going alone. And she was like, I don't want to do this. But her mom was like, okay, listen, go. Get a feel for it, meet your cabin mates, and then, like, if you're so adamant that you don't want to come home.
It's a trap, kids.
They call you breaking up.
Yeah, they're like, I want to come home. They're like measuring your bedroom for an elliptical.
Yeah.
Like,
Sadly, though, that night when all these little kids did arrive to the camp, it was a thunderstorm, and Denise did write her mom like a lengthy letter saying, I want to come home. And then she signed it, your loving daughter, Denise.
Aww.
Then there was Michelle Gousset, who was 9 years old. Her parents had put her on the bus that day and were confident they were fine because they had actually sent her the year before, and she loved it. She had a great time. So when the Girl Scouts arrived at the camp, it was raining and everyone was getting their room assignments. And Michelle, Denise, and Lori were assigned to tent 7. And it's kind of confusing because there is 8 tents that go around, but the first tent, which is going to be on the left-hand side, so it's kind of like a rainbow shape.
Okay.
So the first tent is the counselor's tent, and it doesn't count as a number.
Okay.
But there are 8 tents, so it's like you read it in different areas, and it either says 8 or 7, so they're the same thing. All of the other tents had 4 occupants, except for number 7 or 8. And there was another little girl that was actually supposed to be in this tent. But by the time everybody got organized, it was pouring. And so everybody, the counselors and everybody were just like, okay, just sleep in there tonight. And then in the morning, we'll get it all sorted out.
Did you go to camp? Were you a camper?
I went to, what's it called up there, just in Bradford? It was Scanlon. I went to Scanlon Creek when I was in grade 7.
What is that? Oh, what is that?
It's
place?
a camp. It's a camp. Yeah. And then I went to arts camp.
Right?
I went to arts camp in grade 8, which was so much fun.
Nice. Not like weed, probably.
Except for I had a crush on a dude. And then the last day, it was like a dance. And he asked my friend Laura to go with him instead of me. So, I mean,
that could go either way. Crushing on a dude at arts camp. You're like, I don't know which way this is going. Hey, what's up? I'm Lynn. Hi, I'm Lynn. How's it going?
So the way, like I said, it was a rainbow type shape that the tents were in. But so you would think like with the counselor's tent and then the tent number 7 or 8, they're directly parallel to each other. But the shower unit is in between those things. So technically, the only tent that wasn't able to be seen by the counselors was tent number 8.
Shit. I don't like that you said that.
No. And it's also the youngest campers. Lori Farmer was actually the youngest child that was there at the camp at 8 years old. She was turning 9 relatively soon.
Wow.
Yeah. So they had an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 10-year-old completely out of view of anybody that is above 16.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, and then the counselors, they didn't like, because some of the camps I went to, the counselors were the highest level of kids.
They
campers.
did have a camp like high up, but she was in like a brick and mortar kind of place.
Oh, of course.
She had a shower, full kitchen, and it's still there to this day. It's just abandoned. And like, I watched a YouTube video of them go through it, and they were like videotaping like the kitchen and everything. Creepy as hell.
Oh, man.
So counselors did a head check at 10 p.m. and then they too went to bed. At about 1:30, camp counselor Carla Wilhit was awoken by giggles coming from tent number 6, and she and another counselor, Dee Elder, went to check on the kids and tell them to go to sleep. As Carla was headed back to tent 1, she heard what she described as a low guttural growl.
Uh-oh.
Woof. Somewhere between a foghorn and a bullfrog, she said.
Oh, like...
So she shined her light into the woods and it stopped. And then she went to walk away and it started again. So she shone her light in there again and it stopped again. And so at this point, she was just convinced that it was some type of an animal. Carla awoke the next day at 6 a.m. and went to have a shower. As she walked the main path, she noticed a few sleeping bags that were crumpled up at the base of a tree. As she got closer, she realized that there was a child laying in one of the sleeping bags. And getting closer, she realized that the child's eyes were open and vacant, and she was no longer alive. Counselors began checking all of the tents, and when they got to 7 or 8, they discovered no children and no sleeping bags on the beds. Camp director, Barbara Day, would first call the authorities and then, in an extremely strange move, would call the camp's insurance company before calling the parents. She actually called her insurance company and attorney before contacting the parents.
I mean, you never know how you're going to react.
No,
in a situation
I'm certain
like
you can
this,
say that you should not react like that. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I don't think I would do that.
It's so the correct order, correct me if I'm wrong, would be police, parents,
attorney,
some sort of boss.
Some way down, like days later, you're calling your attorney. Like, let's get this fucking figured out right now, and then we'll deal with the legalities of it later.
Yes.
So a bunch of evidence was left behind. Bloody footprints would be left on the wooden base of the girls' tents. A large flashlight that had a black plastic, like a garbage bag, taped over the light. And then they had just poked a pinhole in it so that they could have like a little bit of light.
Wow.
The inside of the flashlight had also been stuffed with newspaper, because you remember those old humongous flashlights that the battery would like rattle around? So whoever did this wanted that noise to be muffled. Yeah. Sure. All 3 girls had been bound and sexually assaulted in one way or another, and a nearby home robbery would show that a crowbar, a rope, and tape had been taken from the home, and they were believed to be the exact same items that were used in the murders. And those exact items would be found along the fence line of the camp. When I go into this deeper, I will give you a bunch of details, but now for brevity's sake, it was not the owner of the shed who was robbed. He had nothing to do with it. He was quite a suspect for quite some time, but he was eliminated. A squirrel hunter would come across a cave that was located.
Come on. Just say you're a loser.
Okay, a loser who would come across a cave that was close to Camp Scotch.
I'm a big game squirrel hunter.
I'll show them. It looked as though someone had been living there. They found a pair of broken glasses in a beige case, torn masking tape that would later match the tear pattern exactly on the one that was on the flashlight, and 2 pictures of pretty women. These photos were taken by a prison photographer, Louis Lindsay, who was a prison guard where Jean... Okay, so I'm going to tell you who our suspect is. His name is going to be Jean.
I was like, I didn't know what sort of garment his name would sound like. I thought it was Dan with denim, but then I went, Jean, it's got to be.
You figured it out. So Jean Leroy Hart, he was a fugitive that was on the run. He had broken out of a prison in 1973. So he had been on the run for 4 years at this point in time. And he had been sent to jail in 1966 for rapes of 2 pregnant women at the same time. He also beat them up and put tape covering their mouth and nose and eyes. So he kind of just left them for dead.
Wow.
He covered them with, brush, and then he went away. These women, of course, survived. And they would also say that when he was raping them, he too would let out a low guttural noise, much like the one that Camp Cancer heard the night of the murders. So he would be paroled for that crime in 1969. 2 pregnant women, 3 years.
Parole.
Yep. Get out of here. What are you doing in here?
Come on.
Gene? He was then put back in jail because of robberies. And he was given like something absurd, like 800 years or something. He's like, pregnant women rape?
Yeah.
3 years and not a day more. But robberies? Did you buy the O. Henry? I don't think you did.
Well, that's the OJ robbery thing, right? If OJ was jaywalking, he was going to go.
Yeah, fair enough.
His next sentence was going to be
fair enough. I like the way you think so positively, because I just think that they value robbery more than women. But who am I? So then he was able to break out in 1973, and this was his second breakout.
Crazy.
And an inmate that had broken out with him said that they would carry flashlights when they were committing crimes, and they would tape garbage bags covering the lights and would make small pinpricks in the bag so that they could use the tiny little bit of light when they were committing their crimes. This convict would also say that Gene would steal glasses because he had really shitty eyesight, and he was just hoping that one of these days he would steal his perfect prescription.
Oh my God. Maybe wait till you find your perfect pair and then start stealing. Like, I know it's like a chicken and the egg, but like, no wonder you can't find them. You fucking idiot.
So, like I was saying, in that cave, they found these pictures that were taken by the,
prison guard slash photographer.
And those particular pictures were ones that Gene himself had actually, what is it called when you make the photo?
Oh, like commissioned?
No, like he
directed.
No, when you go to like a photo place and they
take portrait. No. Take a photo. Photograph you.
Oh my God, I want to kill you right now.
Subject.
Developed. So he had developed those photos. Also in the cave, they would find the rest of the newspaper that went hand in hand with the one that had been shoved in the flashlight. And it was also written on the cave walls, "The killer was here. Bye bye, fools. 77-6-17."
What an idiot.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned before, we will be doing a way deeper dive on this case, but there's so much more. They finally were able to arrest Gene. He was found at a friend's home and taken into custody. During his preliminary hearing, Gene would be acquitted of his crimes.
Oh, wow.
He was a native to the area. And by native, I mean he was like indigenous.
Yeah.
And he was very respected in the area. And he had so many family and friends and supporters that they were actually rallying out front of the courthouse for him.
No shit.
But luckily, he still had all those bajillion years that he had to serve for stealing an O. Henry.
Oh, yeah.
So they were like, hey, well, you broke out. Like, you can't just go back. So go to jail. And lucky for everyone, 2 months after his preliminary hearing, Gene would drop dead in the workyard.
Nice.
As he had an apparent heart attack. He was 35.
Oh, nice.
But in demon years, I think it's a lot more.
Yeah,
it's
true.
like dogs. It's like 7 years to the, I don't know. In 2019, they would test the DNA that was located, and it would cost tens of thousands of dollars that the sheriff's department did not have. But people in the community would rally, and they came up with the money. And there was 2 DNA samples, but they only had partial profiles. One was a hair follicle, and the other was semen that was left on one of the little girl's sleeping bags. They were only able to say that it did not rule Gene Leroy Hart out, but anyone else that was on the list of suspects was able to be ruled out with those partial profiles.
Who rallied? His supporters to clear him?
No. Well, it's 2019 too, right? So we're talking 22 years later.
Right, okay.
And I don't understand, like his friends and family, yeah, whatever, but you can't kill 3 babies.
No.
So that is the extremely condensed version of the Girl Scout murders. And I will be posting letters that all 3 girls wrote to send home to their parents on their first night of camp. Devastatingly, the parents would not receive the letters until after their children had passed. I will also post a picture of the tent setup so that you guys can understand. And our Instagram is at Everything Scary Pod. And thanks for listening.
Hope to hear from you again.
We really, guys, come join us. We're a lot of fun.
We're kind of cool.
I mean,
some people say they have said it before.
There's been a guy.
I screenshotted it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Rounding out our lineup is Private Dicks, a group of podcasters known for their ability to turn up the humorous heat on unsolved mysteries.
Hello, everybody. Richard here from Private Dicks Podcast. Thanks for getting us in on this summertime collab. We're excited to do it. What you're getting today is a preview for an upcoming episode of Private Dicks, which will be airing on July 31st on our feed. It's about El Chupacabra, the Puerto Rican goat sucker, or the Texan goat sucker. So if you like comedy, you like solving mysteries, if you like having a new guest on the episodes, each and every single episode, and if you can handle a little bit of swearing, then this podcast is for you. I bleeped out the swears in this one for the people who do not like the swears. So I'm thinking about you. Love you guys. Okay? So if you do have time and you want to listen to something new, something a little different, please just give us a chance and go subscribe to our feed, download a bunch of episodes, and hopefully we're your cup of tea. Thanks for listening. Here's a little preview of El Chupacabra. Vampiric, right? Isn't that like, yes, vampiric for sure, in origin. That's a good one, good part of it.
Yeah, so it's probably Rick's cousin.
That's true.
My ex-wife, am I right?
Am I right?
Is that because you captured her and used her as a prop in a horror movie?
Yeah, real bloodsucker.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't think I thought I knew what El Chupacabra was when I first started reading on this, but like what I thought was it was a Mexican cryptid that ate goats. Chupacabra starts in Puerto Rico, but there's been reports of Chupacabra in Mexico, Chile, Spain, Argentina, Brazil, Florida, Texas. There's even one sighting in China. He's made his way over to Asia. All right, this episode is hard to do because it's like so. But okay, let's start with the name. Chupacabra literally means goat sucker in Spanish. So like chupar means suck and cabra means goat. So it's literally goat sucker. That's fun, right?
Goat sucker rocks as an insult.
It is pretty good as an insult.
Look at this chupacabra.
They don't actually like eat goats. What you said, they're vampiric, so they like suck the blood out of goats and other livestock. Goats just, I don't know, for some reason seem to be their favorite meal from all these reports that are out there. But they've also known to suck the blood of cats, sheep, rabbits, dogs, chickens, ducks, hogs.
Hogsucker.
Hogsucker might have been better than goat sucker. You're probably right.
Do you think this thing ever goes after roosters?
I did say chickens. Anyways, honestly, like, man, I had to look up this chupacabra for hours because it's so all over the place. And the internet doesn't have all that much. Like, yes, it has lots, but it's all over the place. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to read a book on this, on someone who like did some work on some chupacabra action. And it's a book called Tracking the Chupacabra by Benjamin Radford from 2011. And it was good. I enjoyed it a lot because he's a huge skeptic. So he just went to go, he researched the chupacabra for 5 years, running down leads like all over South America, like all over the world, really. And just to like debunk them. Like, I love that. Like, all you're doing, dude, is just ruining these people's like
fun
prize piece. Yeah, exactly. I find that hilarious.
This guy's walking around kicking sandcastles over. This is what he's doing.
Because there's so much, like, what is he gonna do? Like, try to make himself happy somehow else? Like, no. That's so much more difficult. Everyone knows that. Like, way easier to just like bring other people down to your level. I love this dude.
Yeah,
it was fun to read. But I did, even reading that book, you find out how laughable the whole chupacabra thing is because it's so vastly the same and so vastly different at the same time. It's crazy. It is the newest of all the cryptids, which I found that was interesting. Like, it started in 1995, really. So it's internet age. It's like first thing that's like grown from the internet. But like the chupacabra, no one really even has a full-blown description for it. Like, there's so many different descriptions. So
wait, hold on 1 second. You're telling me that they haven't come up with any other cryptids since 1995?
It was just the first one from the internet age, like from 95. The newest, like Slenderman's not really a cryptid. He's really a monster. Like you can't really think of anything that's been created past. Like what? Like an animal that lives out in the bush that we haven't seen.
What was that Montauk monster thing that was going around? Like, I don't know, it had to be like 10, 15 years ago or something.
I know what you're talking about, but I'm pretty sure that's an oldie.
It's not older than the chupacabra.
I'm looking it up right now because I know what you're talking about.
2,000 years later.
Oh, no, that's from 2008.
One of the things I found really interesting about the whole sucking of blood is that in the first wave in Puerto Rico, and not so much once it moved to different parts of the world, something we found when we were looking at it over coffee, was that a lot of these neck puncture wounds, when followed with different instruments in an autopsy after the fact, the puncture wounds always went to the brain.
Yeah.
So whatever it was that was going into the neck, the assumption was they were long enough where they were also puncturing the brains. Like it was always directed. They would follow these puncture wounds and they were always directed. So it's just weird. That's the first account of the first 100 in Puerto Rico, but then it changes.
But okay, I will talk about the autopsies later. Like, no one's ever actually done an autopsy on it. And if they have, Benjamin Radford did a terrible job because that's all he wanted was to go. He wanted to find one, honestly. But like, if he never found anybody who actually ever did an autopsy on one of these things. They just say it sucked dry blood. And we'll talk about that later. But like, I love this guy. But the chupacabra, even in early times, was described in like 10 different ways. And then now it's like described, like, okay, here's the fun ways. This is how this has been described, okay? Been described by people who've actually said they've found a dead chupacabra too. So let's keep that in mind. This thing's been caught, or at least a carcass has been found of a chupacabra.
Allegedly.
So here's the ways it's been described. Gray-skinned, but also hairy, could have scales like some sort of lizard. Chupa sometimes changes color like a chameleon. I also saw it was 3 feet tall or 5 feet tall or 4 feet tall. It has a huge nose or it doesn't have a nose at all, just 2 nostrils. It walked like a monkey or a kangaroo or a dog or
I don't appreciate this because this does sound like some of the dates I've been on.
Oh, this one's going to sound like your current wife. I'm just kidding.
Wow. Okay.
Take that, Misty. It says it has spikes run down its back, or it has feathers running down its back, or it's a mixture of spikes and feathers running down its back. It's got long limbs with giant claws, or like short limbs with giant claws, or like their toes are webbed, or like they're not webbed, but like they have webbed arms, so they kind of glide like a flying squirrel, but also not that because they could have wings. Sometimes they're bat wings, but like sometimes they're just like straight up feathered wings. Whatever wings you want, they usually have. Its mouth has 2 giant protruding fangs. That's the only thing that's usually the same in anything. Eyes were in the front of its face or the side of its face or near the mouth on the base of its face. Eyelids sometimes not. Eyes were blood red sometimes, also sometimes orange yellow. Sometimes not even a weird color at all. They're just normal colors. Sometimes, this is another thing you said earlier, sometimes there's even a description of the creature that it has like basic language skills. So like, I'm not going to tell you every encounter for a chupacabra because there's been so many, but I'm going to tell you this one. Apparently, there was a witness who locked eyes with the creature and said, "If you're a chupacabra, you're a pretty sorry excuse for a creature." But it was in Spanish because it was Mexico when this happened. And then the chupacabra turned to her and replied, "Pendejo." So it swears at people. Okay. Not even the funniest one.
Wait, what does that mean?
It means asshole, I think. Pendejo. Pretty sure. Pendejo. Anyways, that's not even the funniest one. One account, the chupacabra said that some farmers like, you know what? AIDS comes from chupacabras because they fuck the cows. You know what I mean? They fucked my cows, and then that's how AIDS came about.
Makes sense to me.
It wasn't us.
It wasn't. I didn't fuck the cow. This is another one.
Yeah. And for no reason should any of you smell my dick right now.
There's another story, and this is reported in a newspaper, that the chupacabra abducted the chupacabra abducted a little girl, tattooed a series of letters and numbers on her forearm.
This is sounding very German.
Dropped the little girl off and then escaped. I don't know. I don't know. It's got a tattoo gun now too. Never captured that one. Okay. Like I said, the only thing that's the same in any of these, like as I go, like some of them are similar, but they just keep going all over the map. It gets crazy. The only thing that's similar is the big long teeth that you're saying. Big, long, sharp canines.
Yeah, I just did a Google image search. It had been a while since I've seen a chupacabra depiction. And I will say, across the board, there is zero sense of consistency.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
The consistency is only, if there's one thing that's consistent, is that all of the reports of anything that was bipedal with no tail, things looked at as being a kangaroo or quite possibly a monkey or something, those sightings were all in and around Puerto Rico, where it seems. And what is the city where it started? It starts with an M. I forget now. We looked at it.
Mount Chupacabra.
Yeah, that would be good as guess.
Mocha.
Yeah. Okay. So this place, anything in and around there, it's similar in what the descriptions was, and everything we saw suggested that once it left from that part of the world, this is where it became more of like a dog-like thing, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of what's fun about this, is that it's so confusing and it still captured people's imagination for a long time. It's still around today. What I did find out is there's 2 different kind of chupacabra, and that's what you're trying to say right now. So there's the original chupacabra, which they call the Puerto Rican chupacabra, and then there's the chupacabra that it turned into, which they're calling the Texan chupacabra. Similar in a lot of ways, but different in a lot of different ways as well. So let's just go from the beginning, and then we'll work our way into like how this moved around. So like you said, started in Puerto Rico. A lot of accounts first placed the attacks of the chupacabra in a small town of Mocha, Puerto Rico, 1975. During the months of February and March of that year, some unknown beast had attacked and killed some animals around various farms, over 100 in one night at some point.
I just watched Private Dicks, and I think RJ's the funniest.
What? Come on.
And that wraps up the first segment of our series, Hot Pursuit. We hope these stories have not only captivated you, but also inspired you to think more deeply about each case. Justice is a pursuit that never truly ends, and sometimes it needs a little help from the public to keep that fire burning.
A huge thank you to all the podcasters who contributed to this collaborative effort. Your passion and dedication to uncovering the truth and telling these important stories is what makes the true crime community so powerful.
Remember, you can always find more information on these cases in our show notes. Make sure you subscribe to the podcasters you enjoy so you never miss a new episode.
And if you have any tips or information about the cases discussed, don't hesitate to reach out to the appropriate authorities. Together, we can help bring justice to those who need it most. In the hot pursuit of the truth, we're all in this together. Welcome back to Hot Pursuit, a summer true crime collaboration, where we continue our exploration of the tales of relentless chases and summer crimes that kept us on the edge of our seats. I'm your host, Allison, from Coffee and Cases podcast, and today we bring you the final part of our special series. And with me is my friend Kristen from True Crime Creepers.
Today, we're turning up the heat even more with fresh tales from our fellow true crime podcasters. These stories capture the essence of pursuit, the relentless drive to uncover the truth, solve the unsolvable, and bring justice to those who need it most.
Get ready for another round of intense, intriguing, and unforgettable true crime stories. Let's dive into the final part of Hot Pursuit. Let's begin our fresh pursuit with the Dark Oak podcast, where they cover mysteries, but with a purpose. Their charity, called Branch of Hope Foundation, shows their unwavering dedication.
Hello, Shiver Seekers. Are you ready to follow us into the unknown? I'm Cynthia.
And I'm Stephanie. You have found the Dark Oak. In today's episode, we will tell you about the tragic story of Robin Gardner, who disappeared from the beautiful Caribbean island of Aruba while visiting with her travel companion, Gary Giordano. Gary says Robin was lost to a freak snorkeling accident, but Robin's friends and family believe Gary is to blame.
Welcome to the Dark Oak, the mystery podcast with purpose. Each month through our charity called the Branch of Hope Foundation, we give back to a nonprofit organization related to the first episode of the month. The stories we cover provide entertainment and excitement, but we never want to lose touch with the human side of each story. To find out more, head to our website at thedarkoak.com.
Well, Cynthia, this is so fun! A summer collaboration!
I'm so excited. This is awesome.
I know. And I want to thank the girlies from True Crime Creepers and Coffee and Cases for inviting us to be part of this collab. Kristen and Allison, you guys rock.
I love the idea that we're all out trying to support each other. That's amazing.
I agree. So today, I thought I could let our gorgeous listeners in on our latest summer case, which is dropping hot right now.
Oh, look at you bringing in the summer fun with the hot.
Hot. Now, this may not be a case you're super familiar with, but I know you recognize the name Natalee Holloway.
I absolutely do. Was just listening to a podcast on her the other day.
It's incredible. I cannot believe they've finally convicted Vandersloot.
Oh my gosh, thank goodness.
Vandershoot.
Ugh.
Yeah, he's disgusting. But did you also know that Robin Gardner is a beautiful American blonde woman who vanished in the Caribbean island of Aruba?
I don't think I've heard of this case.
It's the perfect summer case for us. In August of 2011, 35-year-old Robin traveled to Aruba with her 50-year-old travel companion, Gary Giordano, who was a possible secret lover.
Okay, this sounds a little scandalous.
A little. 2 days into their trip, Robin vanished. Now, Robin was described as a total girly girl and someone who appeared to have it all together. She loved to travel, she loved her 2 cats, Kobe and Toonsy, and she enjoyed shows like The Real Housewives of New York. She also enjoyed the finer things in life and took pride in her appearance. Unsurprisingly, she also liked being treated like a lady.
Okay, I think I'd be her friend.
Yeah, she sounds pretty hip. In 2009, Robin began dating Richard Forrester, who she met on Match.com. They were together 2.5 years before Robin's trip to Aruba. According to Richard, it was an instant connection. He said, quote, "She was outgoing and very friendly. She got along with everybody. She loved to play tennis, run, and stay active." And Richard paints a picture of a fairy tale romance. But unbeknownst to Richard, Robin was still active on Match.com.
Oh my. After 2.5 years?
After 2.5 years.
She didn't just forget to cancel, because I did actually forget to cancel mine. But
no, I wish I could say that was the case, but unfortunately, she was very active.
Oh.
Because this is where she met Gary Giordano.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And it's hard to tell if they were an intimate relationship or more of a transactional one. There are a lot more details to this, but let's just say their relationship fell somewhere between friendship and dating. I don't know. I feel like there may be a third option there, as there was some insinuation that maybe Robin was even an escort. But honestly, there's no evidence to back up any of this, so we don't know. We just know they had some kind of intimate relationship.
Did Richard know about Gary's existence?
Richard was clueless about Gary's existence.
Okay.
Which makes this even harder. Robin and Gary carried on this relationship for a year before Robin's disappearance.
Okay, so this was like a long time of keeping secrets.
Long time of keeping secrets. Over the year Robin and Gary were in contact, Gary was consistently asking Robin to join him on exotic trips and was a little short-tempered whenever Robin would say no, which is concerning.
Some red flags, for sure.
Robin had always declined on any of these trips up to this point, but things changed for her when her life took a bit of a rocky turn. Robin lost her job as a dental coordinator, and this took a toll on her. It really kind of got her down.
Sure, it's a hit to the pride, for sure.
Sure. It was during this tumultuous time, right after a fight with Richard, that Robin made what I think is a terrible lapse in judgment and a pretty knee-jerk decision to go to Aruba with Gary.
Had she ever met Gary in person before?
No, not that I know of.
Okay.
Gary seems to say, of course, after the fact, that they were very, very close, yet he's never provided any evidence that they've met each other outside of this arranged meeting.
And where did Richard think she was going?
Richard thought she was going to Florida to meet with her parents, which would not have been unusual. As a matter of fact, going to Orlando to meet her parents.
Oh, okay.
Where we're recording from.
That's right.
So he's thinking she's in Florida with her family. Meanwhile, she's in Aruba with Gary,
who she's just meeting for the first time in person.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me more.
On the second day of their trip, at approximately 3 p.m., Robin and Gary popped in for lunch at the Rum Reef Bar and Grill on Baby Beach, which is a beach surrounding a protected lagoon on the south side of Aruba. Luckily, the restaurant had incredible video footage.
Wow, we never hear about that.
Which is like the holy grail of true crime mystery podcasts.
Yeah, every single case we're like, guess what?
The cameras weren't working. The cameras were blurry. The perpetrator walked between fence posts at the exact same time the camera was trying to focus. All the things, but there is actual footage. Now, there isn't actual footage of her disappearance or, again, this infamous snorkeling episode, but we get all the details before and after.
Okay, that's amazing.
It is. Robin was wearing a tightly fitted, multicolored, striped, full-length dress with sandals, and she had on a full face of makeup. I'm talking the mascara, the eyeliner, the lipstick, and her hair was perfectly done. She had beautiful blonde hair, lightly curled, with extensions. So to me, it doesn't exactly sound like beach-going gear.
That's not what I would wear to the beach, but it might be what I would wear, like, if I were on a date at a bar with somebody I was potentially seeing.
Sure, and she looked amazing. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But again, not something that I would necessarily wear to the beach.
Okay.
Gary was wearing a black shirt, shorts, socks, and tennis shoes. Only a few minutes after Robin and Gary are seated at the restaurant, Robin goes to the ladies' room, is gone for only 2 minutes. At almost the exact same time, a Facebook message from Robin appears in Richard's inbox. It reads, quote, "I love you. I care about you. We'll sort this out when I get back."
Oh, so it sounds like she might be having some second thoughts about being where she is.
I think so too. And the fact that she had to go to the restroom to send this, which again, I don't know for sure, but based on the timestamps, it appears that that's where she sent this message.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, was she trying to hide that message from Gary for some reason?
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, my imagination is playing out several different types of scenarios, but they all make me sad.
And none of them good.
Yeah.
Exactly. But whatever it is, it's clear that from Robin, we're sensing maybe a little bit of remorse, a little bit of guilt.
Sure.
And she loves Richard.
Sure, absolutely.
At 4:13, the couple leaves the restaurant. The two go into a dive shop, but don't make any purchases. They then head back to their rental car and pull it around behind the restaurant to go to the beach. Now, the dive shop owner remembers them parking the car and thinking it was strange because this part of the beach was not typically an area where tourists would visit to either sit on the beach or to snorkel because the beach was covered in rocks and reef. And this is the last time we see the couple. Everything else is unfortunately not on camera.
But the car is. So them getting out of the car is on camera.
Correct.
Okay.
The next thing we see on camera is Gary at 6:16, so full 2 hours after they were seen on camera before. And he's making his way back to the restaurant. And as he's walking, he's knocking on a few doors. Robin is not with him. Gary doesn't look alarmed or panicked. He isn't jogging or running or pounding on doors. He's just walking along knocking on doors, which is important to note based on what we find out next.
Let me ask you a quick question. When they got out of the car, was she wearing a bathing suit or was she wearing a bathing suit under her dress?
She was not wearing a bathing suit under her dress.
So she's wearing a full-length dress.
According to Gary, she took off her dress and sandals and left them on the beach. Now, after no one answers the knocks on the door, Gary eventually makes it to the back of the restaurant where he speaks to the kitchen staff, telling them to call for help because Robin has been involved in a catastrophic snorkeling incident and is now missing.
But he's just meandering calmly, not running, not acting like his partner just went missing.
That's correct.
Okay.
Gary tells patrons at the restaurant and eventually the police that he asked Robin if she wanted to go for a swim. Without answering him, she got into the water with her snorkel mask, and Gary followed, also wearing his snorkel mask. According to Gary, he found the water current too strong for him, so he tapped Robin's leg and motioned back to the shore. He said she acknowledged him, and so he turned around, and without looking back the entire time to see if she was following him, he swam to the shore. And according to him, at this moment, he felt like he was fighting for his life, yet never turned around to check on his snorkel buddy.
Okay, that's suspicious.
Suspicious. When he reached the shore, he finally thought it was a good idea to turn around and see if Robin was with him, which she wasn't. Now, if you got out of the water and your snorkeling partner was not with you, what's something that you think you would do?
I think I would look for my partner who's obviously in some trouble in this rough water.
I think that sounds so incredibly reasonable. Unfortunately, Gary did not do that. He did not look for her at the shore. He did not re-enter the water. He also did not go get additional gear because it turns out he was a certified diver with dive equipment in his car.
Stephanie, he was not.
He did not do any of those reasonable things.
Okay. No, you're a certified... hold on. Let's go. Certified diver, you've got somebody lost in the water, you have your equipment, and you don't go back in looking for them.
He claimed it would have been dangerous for him to re-enter the water.
Well, yes, maybe so, but it's also dangerous for her to be lost in the water.
Or even stand at the shore and look for her. He, of his own admission, says he didn't even wait at the shore.
He just, she's not there. I'm going to go for a nice leisurely walk and knock on doors.
Well, according to him, it was a run. However, according to the video footage, it was a stroll.
I mean, okay, I wasn't there, but this seems not right.
Not loving it.
Yeah.
Not loving it. Now, later in an interview with Dr. Phil, Gary is asked why he didn't simply call for emergency services on his cell phone. He said he didn't know the emergency service number in Aruba. In case you're interested, it is 911.
Well, and if I were in another country and an emergency happened, I don't think I'd stop and be like, now what is their number? I think I would just try 911.
I would
right
try
or wrong.
all of them. They're almost all subversion. And 999, 911, 900. Try some numbers.
While screaming for help, while running to get help, like all of the things that he's not doing.
All of the things that he's not doing.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just say that. And again, I want to reiterate, as he's knocking on these doors, he's not running, he's not jogging, he is walking, casually walking.
I mean, maybe he's in shock. I don't know.
Lots of questions here, and unfortunately, this is also where I have to leave you.
Okay, so for all the details, you have to come check out the two-parter. Stephanie's amazing at research and these details that nobody's ever heard of before. So I know what you're going to be doing right now is telling me all the rest that you haven't filled me in on.
Listen, we've got a hot two-parter right now at the Dark Oak Podcast. You can find us at thedarkoak.com, on Spotify, on Apple Music, or anywhere you love to listen to your podcast. Again, I want to thank Kristen and Allison. You guys are amazing. And Shiver-seeking listeners, we love you, and we can't wait to see you again soon.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Have an awesome summer.
Bye.
Joining us next is Key to the Case, whose passion for justice burns brightly in every episode, covering unsolved and lesser-known disappearances and suspicious deaths.
Hi, listeners. I'm Sam from Key to the Case, an unsolved true crime podcast that highlights lesser-known cases. Each Sunday, I tell my co-host Sean, along with listeners, about either an unsolved murder or disappearance, and we discuss the case. All right, let's dive in. Lopez Richardson was 32 years old at the time of his disappearance in 2021. Lopez grew up in the small town of Clarksdale, Mississippi, and Clarksdale is often referred to as a birthplace of the blues. It has a rich musical heritage, with several legendary blues musicians having lived or performed there. Music was important to Lopez from a young age, and he was well versed in the history of Clarksdale. Lopez has been described as artistically gifted. When I looked at his work, some of his art, it appeared that he could create art in many forms using different mediums, but it seemed that painting was really his true passion. After high school, Lopez enrolled in Coahoma Community College, located in Clarksdale, and it was here where he met his future wife. Now, in some reports, her name has been withheld by her choice. In some more recent coverage, she has used her name, but just to err on the side of caution, we will call her T, which is the first letter of her first name. T told Paramount Plus's Never Seen Again that when she met Lopez, she had a young son, and Lopez was great with him right away. Lopez really treated him as if it were his own child, and they developed a special bond. T and Lopez eventually married, and they had a daughter together in 2011, whom Lopez adored. And overall, I got the impression that Lopez put being a father first in life, and he really doted on his daughter and his stepson, and they adored him as well. In July 2014, Lopez and T decided to make a move to Houston, Texas. Although they loved Mississippi, they were ready for a change and were possibly looking for different opportunities beyond what Clarksdale could provide. Once they arrived in Houston, Lopez got a job working as a mechanic, and a friend of his was in a motorcycle club. So Lopez became very interested in motorcycles. He joined this motorcycle club, and he began working on motorcycles in addition to cars, I think just kind of in his spare time.
Did they have any family in Houston?
My understanding is that their family was rooted in Mississippi, both of their families. So I don't believe they had any family in Houston, but they definitely had a couple of friends there. It sounded like when they moved there, and then they both made more friends while they were there. In July 2020, Lopez got into a motorcycle accident and sustained pretty severe injuries to his leg and foot. And during surgery, metal pins were inserted into some of the bones in his foot, and they were still present at the time of his disappearance. This injury made it more difficult for Lopez to get around or to walk great distances. After moving to Houston, the relationship between Lopez and T began to fall apart. So they made the difficult decision to separate, although they did not get divorced. At that point, Lopez decided to move to Rosenberg, Texas, because that would bring him closer to where his work was. And Rosenberg sits about 58 miles or 93 kilometers away from Spring, Texas, in the greater Houston area. And that is where T lived. So they're about almost 60 miles apart from each other. Even though Lopez and T were separated, they still maintained a friendship. There didn't appear to be hostility between them at all. And I can imagine this benefited their daughter and T's son for them to see that despite their separation, they could still have a positive relationship. Fast forward a bit to 2021, and Lopez began to merge his artistic talent with his love for tattoos. We already talked about how he was an artist, but he also loved tattoos. He had quite a few on his body, and he decided to become a tattoo artist with the aspiration of opening his own shop, which he ultimately did very shortly before his disappearance. His business was called Dear Life Tattoos in Rosenberg, and by all accounts, the shop was doing well. Lopez and T had an arrangement where their daughter would split time between them. So on July 5th, 2021, their daughter was with Lopez until he called T and asked if he could drop their daughter off with her. Lopez did not state why, but he also didn't give off any red flags at that time or act strangely. So to date, we don't really know exactly why he cut his time short with her, but we have an idea. We will have an idea. After Lopez dropped their daughter off around 11 p.m., T talked with him a few times on the phone until July 7th, so a few days after their exchange. During some of these phone calls, Lopez made alarming statements. He told T that he got involved with some of the wrong people and that he disrespected the wrong person.
So did he upset someone within the motorcycle gang?
Yes, my understanding is that this was at least one person within the motorcycle club. They're referred to as a club, not a gang. So it was someone within there. I think T has a good idea of who this person was or who the people were. She has not ever named them publicly. I don't blame her for not naming them publicly. But yeah, you can imagine in a conversation where your ex tells you this, the father of your child, you're going to be asking those questions. Well, who are you talking about? What did they say? So I think more details were relayed than we know.
So she didn't release the information of this person who she thinks it was after he disappeared?
No, because she said she thinks she knows who it was, but she isn't certain. So she's not going to put someone's name out there and say that when she's not 100% certain, or even if she was, that's something that she has relayed to the police, but she doesn't necessarily need to put their name out there.
Yeah, I mean, she's probably a little bit concerned about her safety and her daughter's safety too.
Yeah, I definitely think she's concerned. Yeah, and I think that's why she wasn't using her name in the beginning. She's using it a little bit more now when she speaks, but I think she was concerned. During those phone calls, Lopez also indicated that he wouldn't get a chance to apologize, although he spoke with his daughter during his last phone call, and he told her that he was very sorry. Then he said, "Goodbye, I love you." When I heard this, I was wondering what he was apologizing for. What happened that was so concerning that he seemed to be scared? T remarked that saying goodbye was unusual for Lopez. He typically just said, "See you later" at the end of a conversation. So this felt like it had some finality to it. It felt a little more permanent to her. About 20 minutes after that final phone call, one of Lopez's fellow motorcycle members called T and asked if she'd heard from Lopez because they were a little worried about him. They were trying to get in touch with him. She found this timing to be odd, but could it be that he was in communication with some of the members? he was making statements similar to those he made to T. That could draw concern. So on July 7th, that was the last known time that Lopez was heard from. And the last time he was known to be seen was actually July 5th when he dropped his daughter off around 11 p.m. in Spring, Texas with T. After that, T's calls and texts began to go unanswered, which raised concerns for T. We have to keep in mind the alarming statements Lopez made, but also that they frequently communicated. They have a child together, but they were still friends too. So it was very much normal for them to talk either on the phone or through text on a regular basis. T's concern continued to grow, so she began searching around Rosenberg with a few others in an attempt to locate him. But when she was unsuccessful, she decided to report him as a missing person to the Rosenberg police on July 8th. Before an investigation could even really begin, Lopez's truck, a Dodge Ram, was discovered abandoned in the woods around 12:45 p.m. on July 9th. So that was the day after T reported him missing. Strangely, his truck was in the town of Howe, Texas, which is located north of Dallas near the Texas-Oklahoma border, almost 330 miles away from Rosenberg, or about a 5-hour drive away. Howe is a small town with a population of approximately 3,700. And according to T, she didn't know anyone there. And as far as she knew, neither did Lopez. There was no reasonable explanation for why his vehicle would have been in Howe. If you'd like to hear the rest of this case, along with other lesser known cases, search for Key to the Case wherever you listen to podcasts.
Here's Kristen and Mogab from True Crime Creepers, a true crime enthusiast and her true crime newbie friend, whose investigations are always thorough, entertaining, and most of all, compelling.
Welcome to a little mini episode of True Crime Creepers, where we talk about all the real-life creeps, from serial killers to con artists. I'm Kristen, the true crime fanatic who loves to tell these stories.
And I'm Mogab, the true crime newbie who hasn't heard any of them.
So we're doing something a little different today. Usually we go pretty in-depth with these cases. Most of our episodes run anywhere from like 1 to 2 hours. But today we're doing quite a shortened version of a normal episode.
Ooh, that's fun.
Where I will be telling you about the disappearance of Brian Schaefer, where a man walks into a bar in Columbus, Ohio. I know.
I'm going to be there literally tomorrow.
And then literally vanishes. He is
What bar?
Never
What
seen
bar?
Again. The Ugly Tuna Saloona.
Oh, the Ugly Tuna Saloona. No. Say it isn't so.
This is going to be more of an overview than what we usually do, but this is such a bizarre story. I can't wait to get into it with you. So Brian Schaefer was a 27-year-old medical student at Ohio State University in Columbus.
The Ohio State University.
Oh, sorry. The Ohio.
Catty corner from the Big Tuna Saloon.
Yes. So he and his girlfriend, Alexis Wagner, they had plans to spend spring break in Miami, but they were really looking forward to that trip. Alexis was also a medical student, and they just deserve some time to let loose and relax. And some people said that Brian was even planning on maybe proposing to Alexis on this trip. So this trip was a big deal for both of them. Now, a few days before the trip, Brian and his roommate, William Clint Florence, decided to go out. This was March 31st, 2006. Alexis was in Toledo for the weekend visiting her parents before their Miami trip. This is I think Friday. They're leaving Monday to go on their trip. But Brian did call her around 10 p.m. that night. He sounded normal. He told her he loved her, told her he'd see her Monday morning when they left for their trip. So Brian and Clint hit up Columbus's University District and go to the Ugly Tuna Saloona bar. They took a few shots. They had a few beers. Then they left the Ugly Tuna to go to the Arena District and then the Short North District, which...
Yes, you are speaking all of my favorite places,
so correct me if I'm wrong. It seemed to me like all of that was within about a 10-minute drive of each other, the University
it's all
District.
right there.
Okay.
It's all downtown, little hops.
Okay.
Hop around.
Perfect. So they ran into Clint's friend, Meredith Reed, and they decided to all go back to the Ugly Tuna. So she drove them back there. And now the entrance, have you been there? Like the original one that's like 2 stories, not the Tuna Saloona 2 that apparently, because this one apparently is closed down.
Didn't know there was Tuna Saloona too.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been to the Ugly Tuna.
So the entrance to the Ugly Tuna is on the 2nd floor of this like large building in the Gateway complex. So the 3 of them, so it's Meredith, Clint, and Brian, the 3 of them are seen on security footage riding the escalator up to the 2nd floor at 1:15 a.m. 40 minutes later, so just a few minutes before closing time, like 1:55, Brian is seen like in the corner of the security tape, like near the front door, chatting with a few women. This is like right at the top of the escalators. But then he walks off camera. He doesn't go down the escalators. He just walks off camera, presumably back inside, and he's never seen again.
Really?
Meredith and Clint said that after they got separated from Brian, they figured he just left the bar without telling them. He did live within walking distance, so it wouldn't be that weird. They'd tried calling him a few times over the weekend, but never got a hold of him. Brian's parents were also calling him all weekend, as was Alexis, and everyone was starting to get really worried. They had already kind of started a search for him by Sunday. They were going to the Gateway complex. They were checking dumpsters and everything. But it wasn't until Monday morning when Alexis showed up at the airport for their trip to Miami, just hoping that Brian would still show up. Like maybe he had freaked out about something and needed some space or some time alone or whatever, but he's not going to miss this trip. But he didn't show up. And so that was when the alarm was finally sounded. Alexis knew for sure something was very wrong, and she called to report him missing. A large search of the area was ordered as soon as he was reported missing. There was up to like 50 police officers searching for him. They scoured the CCTV footage from Ugly Tuna and the surrounding businesses looking for him. They were able to account for every single person that walked into the Ugly Tuna. They were able to find them on security footage leaving, every single person except for Brian.
Where did he go?
That is really the question, because the escalator was really the only way out of the bar and he wasn't on it. Now, there was a back door. This was not like a public exit, but they did have another like way out of the bar.
Like a fire.
Yeah, it was this freight elevator, but that elevator led to this construction site. And we'll kind of get into the construction site a little bit, but
that everything there is under construction all of the time.
Well, and
like a constant.
My understanding is they're not like digging a hole and pouring concrete at this they're like renovating a building, and like most of the renovations were kind of already done, because some people are like, oh, maybe they poured concrete over him, but it's my understanding that there was no concrete poured like after this. So that didn't really make sense, but I'm not 100%. They questioned Brian's friends and relatives. They gave everyone polygraph tests. Well, everyone except his roommate, Clint, the one that had been out with him that weekend.
Well, that seems weird.
He's the only person who refused to take the test, which did feel weird to people. And I'm like, I don't want to hold that against him too bad, because we all know that polygraph tests are unreliable and that can kind of blow back on you in not a good way. And maybe he knew that in 2006, but it feels odd.
Forget this was 2006. That feels so long ago.
I know. And also those 2 women that Brian was seen chatting with on the surveillance tape, they were never questioned either.
Dang.
Everyone remained hopeful that Brian would turn up, but when his credit cards and cell phone weren't used one time in more than a year, that hope started to dwindle. And it's now been almost 20 years and no sign of Brian Schaefer.
20 years. Whoa.
I know. There was one sighting in 2020 of this homeless man that looked to be like an American man in Tijuana, Mexico. And he looked a lot like Brian. So people were like, oh my God, is that Brian Schaefer? Is that Brian Schaefer? But the FBI ran facial recognition and determined that it wasn't him. And other than that, there's been like no signs, no sighting. Nobody can even figure out how he left the bar. So I wanted to go through like a few of the theories of what maybe happened to him.
Wait, what happened to Alexis? Like, she goes to the airport.
She called the police and reported him
but I'm
missing.
like, she's not going to Miami, and she's like,
no,
right?
No, she didn't go to Miami.
Okay.
She has now like gotten remarried and she has kids,
Yeah.
2 kids and everything. But yeah, no, she did not.
Sad.
She did not get on the plane. She called the police. Yeah. I think she just showed up at the airport, like hoping that he would be there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one theory is the accidental death and concealment theory, which I just don't see how there's any way this was accidental and then his body has been concealed for all of this time.
Yeah, especially with literally, no joke, all of the construction on High Street all of the time.
Yeah, so that's one reason why people were thinking like concealment, because they're like, okay, there's this active construction site, and so maybe he like stumbled back there taking the freight elevator down through the back and stumbled out and tripped, and then they poured and fell and knocked his head and fell in a hole, and then they poured concrete over him unknowingly, and now he's like buried in the foundation of this building. But that just seems like so not plausible.
Yeah.
And also it seems like you can check for that kind of stuff. And also I did read that the construction was basically over by that time, and so it would be very like, it just doesn't seem very likely that that's what happened. But none of these options seem likely. Like none of them do.
No. He's okay. Option 1, he's disappeared out of thin air. Option 2,
he's buried in concrete in the foundation of this building. Yeah.
Yeah.
So option 2 is voluntary disappearance, that Brian just chose to disappear. He was having a lot going on in his life. He had recently lost his mother to cancer, and they were like really, really close. So that could have kind of triggered this flight instinct, I suppose. But everybody close to Brian, including Alexis, his dad, his brother, like everybody said, there's no way that he's leaving. Not to mention,
you keep it up this long,
and
like,
also
what, 20 years?
Disappearing and being completely off the grid. That is so hard, and it takes so much planning. And he'd been drinking all night. He'd been taking shots. He'd been drinking beers. If you are planning to enact this like foolproof plan that's so good that you've been able to completely disappear, no credit cards were used, no cell phone was used, like, and never found either. They didn't find your like cell phone and stuff.
Well, and if that's my plan, I'm not going out the night before where there's security cameras.
Right. Or I am for like an alibi or whatever, but like I'm not getting drunk.
Yeah.
And then disappearing and then actually making that work. And then even so,
and
even if
missing a trip to Florida.
Even if that's true, okay, for that to be true, he would have had to get out of the Ugly Tuna and avoid all the security cameras getting out of there. So like, how would he have done that? You know, like,
I don't, yeah.
Okay, so obviously the last couple theories are like foul play theories. So was he abducted by somebody? But even then, how did he get out of the bar?
Well, I mean, we've done cases where like someone's body's in a suitcase or a trash can or...
Yeah,
you know,
and so there was a lot of like, was anybody carrying anything that could have concealed him? Was he in like a trash can? Yeah. So maybe somebody like hurt him and then somehow, but it's like everybody that went into the bar was accounted for leaving. So it's not like anybody hurt him and then is hiding in there, you know, waiting to take him out with
like,
the
how
trash
sure can
later.
you be? It's security cameras in 2006.
Yeah,
Are
that's
you really
true.
able to
That's
one
true.
for one identify?
They said that
especially
they did,
when everyone's
but-
dressed like bros.
Right.
2006.
Right. And the security
you know?
cameras, they are pretty grainy.
Right.
Like you got to know exactly what you're looking for. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I guess that's possible. If like somebody hurt him, it would have had to have been upstairs or on the bar, or they lured him down that freight elevator and for some reason like lured him over to maybe that construction site area just because it's like isolated.
Well, if they lured him out the freight elevator, they could have taken him anywhere and killed him.
Right.
Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be the construction site because that's the back
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, but like, why? you know? But if you don't
Yeah.
know who, it's hard to know why. That's crazy. The biggest mystery to me is this ugly tuna saloon in number 2. I'd like more information on that.
Well, so I tried to look up, like I was trying to like Google Maps, like the ugly tuna saloon, because I wanted to see like, okay, what's this escalator situation? Like, what does this building look like? And I actually had to look up the address because the ugly tuna saloon is closed, and now there's the ugly tuna saloon 2, and it's open and it's all downstairs. It's like it's not in the same place.
What? That's not as fun.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the last and most like sensational theory that gets people all excited is the smiley face killer theory.
What?
So there is this like supposed serial killer or group of serial killers that people call the smiley face killers. And this actually got pretty recently, like it's gotten put in the news again. There was like this big thing about the smiley face killers being in all these different cities like last year. But anyways, it's like all of these men, like Brian's age men, were being found killed or dead, and by their body there would be some sort of graffiti with like a smiley face on there. And so these two, I think they were like FBI agents. They were like retired though. I mean, I'm like retired like police officers or FBI agents or something. They came up with this theory that all of these murders were being done by this like group of this like team of serial killers that they call the smiley face killers. And most people, I think, just kind of figure that like a smiley face because the smiley faces also didn't always look the same. They weren't always drawn the same. Sometimes they had a circle around them, like the head. Sometimes it was just like the two eyes and the smile. It was different colors. Like there was no pattern to it. So people are like, most of law enforcement, I think, is like, well, a smiley face is like the most common graffiti symbol.
Doodle.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like you're going to see that everywhere. And like there was no connection between these bodies. And so there's a lot of debate on whether or not the smiley face killers are even real. But they were supposed to be, or supposedly active in this area. And there was, I think, a smiley face found near the area, or like near the ugly tuna, maybe. There's never been any like definitive connection to Brian's case, but he does fit like the demographics of what people think the smiley face killers are after, which is like young college age men, you know, and especially after they've been drinking at bars, like that was a big thing. So a lot of people, like most of these deaths are always chalked up to being like accidents. But people are like, what if these aren't, because they're like drunk men, you know, leaving bars and
because
dying.
the ugly tuna is known for a fishbowl the size of my entire head.
Well, they're also known for having a happy hour from 8 to 10 where they sell ridiculously strong drinks for $1. So and they have a $10 minimum for a credit card. So you have to buy 10 of those to pay for the credit card. So there was a lot of really like interesting, because there was a big thing in Austin last year where they were really trying to say that possibly the smiley face killers, or if not them, then a serial killer was active in Austin, because all of these college age men from Rainy. Yeah, it was like when we went to Rainy Street for your bachelorette
You were
party.
like, are we still going to Rainy Street?
I was like, I think there's a serial killer active around here. I don't really think that anymore. I am more kind of inclined to believe that these are accidental drownings, because they're like in Lady Bird Lake, which is like right down from Rainy Street. But same thing in Columbus. These smiley face killers were like supposedly active there. And so maybe Brian was killed and then dumped like in the water, you know, nearby. Is there water nearby?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe that's where he is.
So
those are kind of the theories, but just none of them are like super compelling. None of them are like, oh yeah, that's probably what happened. Like it's so just kind of frustrating and confusing. And there's a lot more to this case, obviously, but we are already going over our time. So I couldn't get, you know, as deep into it as I usually like to. But that is the disappearance of Brian Schaefer.
Man, I did not know about that.
Yeah. All right, well, check out True Crime Creepers. We hope you'll check us out.
Bye, peeps and creeps.
Feel the heat rise with the hosts from Vintage Homicide as we join them in the exploration of various perspectives of crimes of the past.
Welcome to Vintage Homicide with your hosts, me, Ruby Wild.
And Miss Mayday.
And we bring you historic homicide cases with deep dives into everything from the forensics used to solve the crimes, as well as pivotal events that were occurring at the time, and so much more. Let's dive into today's case. We're starting this out in New York in March of 1967 with June Fisk Maloney. She was a practicing nurse, and she was on her way to living her best life at the age of 26. She had left her allegedly abusive husband, Joseph Maloney, of 5 years, with a report even at one point he had attempted to stab her through the roof of her convertible car. That charge was never brought forth because she withdrew her complaint. She and her 2 children, with Joseph Jr., and Patricia, who went by Patty, moved into a 2-bedroom apartment, and she was moving on with her life, even seeing a new man. Joseph had previously been married to a woman named Joan Howland, and that couple also had 2 children. From the lack of information I could find about him with that family, I'm guessing they never had any contact after their divorce. So we're just going to unfortunately have to leave Joan in the past, and we're going to focus on June and their family. So it was their son's 5th birthday. Again, this is Joseph Jr., and we're in May of 1967. That was a reason for them to get together and just to get along, have a good day for the celebration. Unfortunately, she started to feel ill after the party, and so the next day, her friend, Wanda Mordenga, she went to her house to check on her, and she saw that Joe was already there checking on her, and he had brought a doctor with him. Now, Joe was convinced that she was just suffering from food poisoning from the party or anything that she ate before or after, but the doctor was not so sure that it was food poisoning. This was even more so evident when she fell into a coma the following day. She was brought to the hospital, and while at the hospital, the doctors were banging their heads against a wall trying to figure out what was making June sick. Joe thought he had the answer. He said that because of their impending divorce and her living alone with the 2 kids, she was depressed and suicidal, and he believed that she was ill and fell into a coma because she tried to take her own life. Insert the red flags. Shining even brighter when June finally succumbed to her illness on June 5th. So this was, 2 weeks of her from May to June. She was in a coma, ill, and died. And so they performed an autopsy on her and discovered that she had actually been poisoned with methanol. Methanol is not the ethanol that we drink. It's still an alcohol, but not.
Yeah. So like you said, the alcohol that we drink is actually ethanol, which is made by fermenting simple sugars, and then it's distilled. The distillation process is how we get the strength of alcohol and its purity. Methanol is a more simple form of alcohol, but it's really toxic to humans, even in really small doses. The good thing is that normal distillation and fermentation to create alcohol that we drink, methanol doesn't really occur during that process. It can maybe in small trace amounts, but it's still safe to consume. Originally, how methanol was created was produced through the destructive distillation of wood, and that's why it was originally termed wood alcohol. As far as methanol and its effects on the body, it is actually not necessarily the methanol that is the thing that's harmful. It's really what it converts into when the body breaks it down. So it reduces into formaldehyde and formic acid. Both of those things are the things that cause the cellular hypoxia, which is cell death. It's really famous for making people blind, and we say being blind drunk, right? This is a function of it attacking the optic nerve. Even as little as 10 milliliters of pure methanol can potentially cause blindness, and a lethal dose is only about 30 milliliters of methanol. The scary thing about methanol, its taste and smell is almost indistinguishable from ethanol. It's not really easy to detect the difference. In industry, methanol is widely used as like a denaturant additive to ethanol.
We use it in the lab a lot. It's
because it's very similar in chemical properties. It's a denaturant.
Yeah.
So we would use it for a disinfectant. It's in things like antifreeze, paint removers, windshield wiper fluid. It's a very common solvent.
It's basically a good solvent.
And poisonings can happen as an accident, but generally there's labeling that would indicate that this poison is present. So poison themselves, and it's even rarer as a suicide attempt. However, some alcoholics will intentionally consume methanol as an alternative to ethanol. That's just out of desperation. In the US, during Prohibition, when alcohol was not available, methanol poisoning became very common with the consumption of bootlegged alcohol because they were cutting ethanol with methanol. So if they didn't get the ratio correct, they were using too much methanol and it was poisonous. In June's case, classic case of methanol poisoning, usually you don't notice for like 12 to 24 hours just because it feels like a extreme buzz, similar to ethanol. But then after that, you'll experience an extreme headache, dizziness, weakness, and it's like a really bad hangover essentially. But then that's followed by nausea, vomiting, and then eventually blurring of your vision and blindness. And then with severe poisonings, you can have seizures or fall into a coma. And June's case, also death.
Right. And because of this, Joe being the prime suspect, he was promptly arrested and charged with her murder. Now, during the course of the investigation, to determine how he was able to accomplish such a poisoning, they started talking to the family and the friends of the family. And they found Neil Dunkelberg, and he was a basement chemist with a story to tell. Joseph had asked Neil if he knew of a poison that was odorless, tasteless, and untraceable, telling his friend that he wanted to get rid of a stray dog. Neil was weirded out by this and basically told Joseph no, and then further told his family, never allow Joseph into our basement. That's where my chemistry lab is, and he's weirding me out. Unfortunately, the Dunkelberg family went on vacation, and he left his sister to house sit, but he didn't tell her about the warning of Joseph. And so she didn't know about the ban, and she allowed Joseph to go into the basement to collect whatever he wanted. This is apparently where he got the methanol. Now, all of this together, the circumstantial evidence in her poisoning and Neil's account was enough for the jury to believe that he was guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison starting September 1967. Now, Joseph pled insanity, and this allowed him to be sent to Rochester State Mental Hospital in New York, and that was for an evaluation. So anytime somebody pleads insanity, as we know, they have to get evaluated by multiple psychiatrists to determine whether or not they serve their time in a mental institution or in the prison system. Unfortunately, it only took 2 weeks for Joseph to escape this mental hospital. And that's because in the past, he had been a janitor at that hospital. So he knew all of the ins and outs, and he figured out how he could leave completely undetected. And there was no sight of the man until 1973, when bartender Michael O'Shea had to call the Gardaí to his house in Dublin because he had been burgled. Gardaí is like, it's the same as our police. They're their own kind of
Yes, that's correct.
history.
So the Gardaí, that's an informal name. It means the guard. Originally, the formal title is the Garda Síochána, which means like the guardians of peace. So it's really pretty. It takes its name after its French counterpart, which is also the Guardians of Peace, but in French. It changed from originally, it was called the Civic Guard under the English. And then Ireland adapted its own police force in its own Irish titling.
Right.
So
they're so pretty. What happened is when he called them for his house, they took his fingerprints for elimination purposes, and that's where they had a surprise. This man, Michael O'Shea, was really Joseph Maloney, and that's because they matched his prints to those that they had on an FBI wanted poster. Unfortunately, this didn't mean that he immediately was arrested for any means, and that's because Ireland didn't have an extradition treaty to the United States, so Ireland couldn't hold him and they had to let him go. So you can't be arrested in Ireland for something that you did in the United States. This is the way that Michael was living his life in Ireland. You would have no idea that he was a fugitive from the United States because from the mid-1970s through the 1980s, he ran a place called the Capard House. It was a mansion in the Slieve Bloom Mountains. He had renovated the home to make it a resort, and he cleaned out the lake, and that's because he wanted it to be a sanctuary for outdoor enthusiasts to come and they can shoot and fish on the property. He was throwing lavish parties. He was living the high life, and he didn't live on that property. He had 2 homes in Dublin with his third wife, Sheila. There, of course, were tales going around. I mean, it's really hard to keep the rumor mill down, especially after his fingerprints were taken and they figured out that he was Joseph Maloney. Michael told tales all the time. He was saying, oh, I'm ex-military and I'm this and I'm that. And he even lied about his age. According to his marriage license to Sheila, he said that he was 7 years younger than what he was. And so anybody that knew him knew that he had, according to him, lived way too many lives for somebody who looked like he was in his mid 40s. There was even rumors about the fact that he was wanted in America for killing his wife, but everybody just thought that they were rumors. And Michael never told Sheila who he was, just kind of shined on what was happening in America. And that would explain her shock when Michael was finally arrested in 1985 for the murder of June. And that's because there was finally a treaty of extradition in effect from Ireland to America.
This was finally in 1985, right? But negotiations of an extradition treaty between Ireland and the United States, they began as early as like the mid 70s. The whole purpose of it was to widen the extent of Ireland's extradition arrangements, which up until then had only been confined to Europe. This was its first bilateral extradition treaty with the United States. The whole purpose of it was because, one, we didn't have one. There was an obvious gap in relations between Ireland and the United States. Ireland's extradition commitments only included other European countries, and that was based on the European Convention on Extradition. And so there were several European countries like the UK, Austria, Germany, Hungary. The object of this treaty was to basically increase that cooperation between the US and Ireland in combating crime and bringing justice to suspected criminals who sought to avoid prosecution by leaving US jurisdiction and going to Ireland, because Ireland was basically seen as a safe haven for American criminals. In negotiating the terms of the treaty, there was a lot of care taken to ensure that the terms complied with the original Extradition Act that Ireland had in 1965, which basically limited offenses for extradition to those which are punishable by both countries for a period of more than 1 year. So the crime has to be a sentence of more than 1 year in both countries. So that's like the minimum requirement. Following this treaty, basically 5 people were wanted for prosecution in the United States. They submitted requests to Ireland to get them extradited. In accordance with the treaty, 2 people basically were subsequently extradited. And that was because of all of the challenges in the courts. Of these 5 people requested for extradition, one of which was Joe Maloney, because he had been living in Ireland under the alias of Michael O'Shea. He was finally apprehended at that time by Irish authorities under the extradition treaty. But unfortunately, he was released from custody because the treaty started to completely collapse. And this was mostly because of a lot of the appeals. And there was a lot of Irish Supreme Court cases that were basically fighting the extradition to the United States and other countries. And so basically the Supreme Court released Maloney, and they got it wrong once again in a series of several extradition cases where there were appeals that went to the Irish Supreme Court. So with that precedent being set, that regardless of this treaty, the Irish government would set them free, basically Ireland continued to be seen as a haven for fugitives from justice. So in 1986, Maloney walked out of an Irish prison.
So
and then he went on the lam.
Now we have, and that's where he faded into the ether until a new investigative podcast recently released called Runaway Joe. It's brought to you by Tim Desmond and Pavel Barter. And they were able to discover that Joseph actually died in 2005 at the age of 70. Sheila Chandler, his third wife, confirmed the account before she too died in 2010, and she never told anywhere where he had been buried. So if you're looking for a good multi-part, in-depth coverage of this case, go ahead and check it out. There was like a whole thing. They had moved to Berlin and I want to say Turkey, and it was all about them jumping all around, and it was a huge
he moved to other countries that didn't have extradition
just
to the United States,
in case Ireland
basically.
and the United States picked it back up again. They were also able to determine that Joseph had not 4, so the 2 previous to Joan and the 2 to June, but he had 6 children, 2 from Joan, 2 from June, and 2 from affairs that he had while he was married to June. And this was all developed by the help of DNA. And the children were only now recently all aware of each other, and they all started to get into contact. So we know that this is short and sweet. It's just a tease of what we offer over at Vintage Homicide. So while you're adding new podcasts to your summertime listen library, go ahead and give us a follow. And we're not going to cut you completely off from our little dad jokes. So, Miss Mayday, what is the best asset for a fugitive?
Yes.
His lie
I don't know
ability.
what.
Get it?
Oh, okay.
See, bad dad jokes. You get those too.
Liability.
All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.
Well, thank you.
When the chase gets hot, the stories get hotter and funnier. Take a hardcore look at softcore crimes with Leroy from Excuse Me, That's Illegal.
What's up, everybody? Leroy here, host of the Petty Crime Podcast, Excuse Me, That's Illegal. And have I got a hot story for you that just screams summer. This tale takes us to New York. Gotta love New Yorkers. Hey, watch it, pal, I'm walking over here. Car horns blaring everywhere, lots of traffic. I've never been. That's just what I picture when I hear of New York. To narrow it down, this crime happens in Chelsea, which is a neighborhood on the west side of Manhattan. And of course, it goes down at everyone's favorite summer spot, at least mine, and that's 7-Eleven. 'Cause that's where the Slurpees are at, baby. Slurpees. Often imitated, never duplicated. There are so many imposters out there, and none of them taste quite as sweet. Just kidding, they're all basically the same. It's not a complicated recipe. Slush with some artificial syrup flavoring in there. They got hundreds of flavors. Every convenience store seems to sell them these days. 7-Eleven is the only place that can officially call them a Slurpee. Circle K is the big convenience store in my area. Their slushies aren't bad, and they call them Frosters. Anywho, this fine 7-Eleven establishment is located at 194 7th Avenue. That's between West 21st and 22nd Streets. Imagine being a cabbie in New York City. That'd be a nightmare. All those numbers sound confusing as heck. I checked out images of this place. It's your typical 7-Eleven. Fluorescent lighting, sweaty hot dogs and taquitos, spinning around collecting dust and disease on those rollers. Big gulps, pizza slices, cigarettes, potato chips, energy drinks, and a big old Slurpee machine, of course. It's beside a place called Fancy Nail and Spa. Fancy spelt F-A-N-C-I-E. The sign out front says they also give foot and back rubs. Nice. We have a couple reviews to read for the 7-Eleven, not the nail spa. This place gets 2.8 out of 5 stars, our lowest rating yet. And that is out of only 23 reviews. Let's see what this is all about. Joel B. gave this 1 star a few years ago and said, quote, "Their team is not friendly. They are very confrontational. The store owner said she is the owner and can talk to anyone however she wants. She don't have no respect. And I wouldn't recommend no one to support their madness. They are disrespectful, all over wanting to charge me for a hot dog before I received it. Then tell me to stand in line to pay for my drink after. Shaking my head. Good luck." End quote. Let's get another one from Steve S. He says, "Poor management. Employees are always late to their shift. Roaches and rats running around the store floor. Quit my job on December 26th of 2018. There are no benefits for employees either." Okay, I guess we have to take that with a grain of salt, as he sounds like a former disgruntled employee. So that's the store we're dealing with. A busy 7-Eleven in New York City, with rude employees and an alleged roach and rat infestation. With all that taken into account, let's be flies on the wall of this store back in the hot and humid summer of 2016. It's Sunday, August 28th, it's 3:45 p.m., and one of the employees is on the phone with the cops. Enough is enough. He's calling the NYPD to report a theft. The police show up, and manager Havim Mahisi explains to them what's been going down. You see, for over 3 weeks now, some guy has been walking into the store, filling up a small cup at the self-serve Slurpee stand, then strutting out without paying for it. This isn't a teenager either. They described him as being in his 30s or 40s. And I love the balls on this guy. A little more info about the layout of the store. The Slurpee stand is located at the very back, so he grabs the drink, then he has to walk the length of this place with the icy treat to get out of there. There's a photograph of the Slurpee station. It's stocked with all the different sized cups with lids and those thick jumbo straws. And the flavors. Oh man, the flavors. Wild cherry, Hawaiian punch, blue raspberry, Sour Patch Kids, Coca-Cola, and Skittles. Way better selection than I'm used to. I never knew they had the Skittles flavor. It's featured on a sign that has the catchy slogan, "Slurp the rainbow, taste the rainbow." Clever. So this is a selfish act indeed, but hey, at least he grabs a small cup each time. They sell a small for $1.79. How much is that little bit of artificial slush this guy's taking actually worth? 25 cents? Who's robbing who over here? By the time DNA Info New York sat down for an interview with a fired-up manager in early September, the petty thief, with Slurpee water in his veins, had been helping himself to the ice-cold beverage for over a month. Employees weren't sure what to make of this guy the first few times. Then it became crystal clear. He's just a jerk. Manager Havim, quote, "We thought maybe he doesn't understand. Maybe he has a mental problem or something. But no, he's totally normal. After we spoke with him, he 100% understands. He's doing it on purpose." End quote. Another employee chimed in and said, quote, "It's just a hassle. But what are you going to do, you know? It's a Slurpee." End quote. Exactly. You can kind of see their predicament here. You don't want to tackle the guy over a $2 drink. In the grand scheme of things, it's not really a big deal. This being New York, I'm sure they deal with these small thefts on a regular basis. It's the habitualness of it all that has them up in arms. The guy's coming in almost daily. He's a regular, and it's become a part of their day. A serial Slurpee thief. It's great. Maybe this guy's poor and can't afford the tasty treat. Or maybe it's all a game for him. He enjoys the angered employees' reactions. It's just a big joke. I'm going with the latter. Let's get yet another Manager Havim quote. On his way out, he shows the cup and says goodbye. He shows the cup like he's laughing at us. End quote. Okay, it's official. It's definitely a joke to this man. Instead of just trying to sneak out with anyone knowing, in a final FU to the employees, he raises his glass and bids them farewell. I love the showmanship. Thanks, guys. See you tomorrow. The best. The NYPD say they'll keep an eye out for the guy, but let's be honest, they're not looking. Surely they have more serious crimes to contend with. The store is going to have to take matters into their own hands, take a more aggressive approach. Keep an eye out, and when they see him, cut the guy off before he makes the long walk to the back of the store and refuse him service at the Slurpee station. That shouldn't be hard, right? Wrong. The Slurpee bandit is just too sneaky. Final Manager Havim quote. We tried to catch him, but whenever the store is busy, he sneaks inside and takes a cup and then leaves. It's like he's watching us from outside. End quote. Oh man, we're dealing with a criminal mastermind. With the amount of effort the Slurpee bandit puts into these mini heists, I say just let him have it. Maybe even flip the script on him. Kill him with kindness. He seems to get off on angering the employees, so when they see him, they should ask how his day's going. Chat about the weather. It's a hot one today, isn't it? Give him flavor recommendations. As he's leaving, tell him to have a nice day, or say, thank you, come again, see you tomorrow. Or just go, hey, enjoy, that one's on me, bro. He'd probably lose interest or actually start feeling bad. LipstickAlley.com covered this story. Yes, I have only the best sources. And the message boards were getting lit up. A few people were on the store's side, but an overwhelming majority were siding with the bandit. Swedish Chick X3 said, to be honest, I really don't care if someone wants to steal a bunch of Slurpees. This story is hilarious, and we should just let him keep doing what he's doing. 877 Cash Now says, I hope he's stealing the pina colada flavor. That one is so good. They went on to say, I think I might know who it is. If there was a reward, I'm turning him in. Someone should track her down and interrogate her. Lala Sharp has a good idea. She said, they should do like the BSS. They blow up an image of the person stealing along with a blow-up of the person's face and place it on the window to put him or her on blast for others to identify and I guess humiliate the person to the point he might not ever enter again. I don't know what the BSS is, some store I guess, but that's a good idea. Try to shame him into stopping. That might backfire and turn the guy into a local celebrity though, just adding more fuel to the fire. To my knowledge, the serial Slurpee bandit in New York City was never caught. At least if he was, it didn't make any headlines. Police probably would have just urged him to stop and told him if he didn't, they could nail him for petty theft, mischief, all the usual stuff. I'm sure over time he just lost interest and moved on. Either way, I'm raising a glass to the serial Slurpee bandit, because I like his style. Enjoy the rest of your summer, everyone, because I know I will.
In our next segment from Beyond the Rainbow podcast, our host CJ helps us turn up the heat in our investigation of crimes committed by and against the LGBTQ+ community.
Hey there, I'm CJ from Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. Your gender and sexual identity doesn't matter for you to listen to my podcast. In fact, I'd say at least 50% of my listeners identify as straight allies. So welcome. Woo woo! Are there any basketball fans in the house? Well, regardless of whether you are or not, I do have a story for you. And in my opinion, it's always important we give voices to the victims. At the beginning of the year 2014, NBA superstar Reggie Bullock had 3 sisters and 1 brother. The pro team Reggie was best known for being part of was the Detroit Pistons. Reggie's now with the Houston Rockets. He's called a small forward, with his height being 6'6" and weight around 205 pounds. And quite frankly, that's not very small to me. In the summer of 2014, Reggie lost one of his sisters. She was murdered. This sister, Mia Henderson, was born as Kevin Long. Kevin Long is what her dead name would be. And just in case you aren't quite sure what a dead name is, it's a person's given name that they no longer wish to be called. Therefore, the name is dead. And since Mia was assigned male at birth, it stands to reason she most likely suffered from gender dysphoria. That is, up until her transitioning into a female. For my research, I often equate gender dysphoria to wearing underwear that are 6 times too tight 24/7. It's a discomfort that nags at the person who has to bear it. Relief from it only really comes from hormone therapy and later gender reassignment surgery. I hope that helps some to understand. I had to compare it to something so I could get a grasp of it when I first started my podcast. Although not too long ago, I did speak with a trans woman who told me not all trans folk go through gender dysphoria. And I guess that perplexed me. And I should have asked her, then why bother? If it isn't physically or mentally unbearable to be the gender you were assigned, why would anybody want to put themselves through the heartbreak of possibly being ostracized, not just by friends and family, but by a good portion of society? Not to mention screwing with your hormones and having any surgical procedure done to your body if it's not a necessary procedure for good mental and physical health. But I didn't ask her, so I really don't have an answer. Which is why I'd say a good portion of trans folk do suffer from gender dysphoria, and nobody should ever have to be uncomfortable in the body they were born in. In the summer of 2014, 26-year-old Mia was living in Baltimore, Maryland. July 16th, Mia was hanging out on a street. It was well known as a place sex workers frequented. This was in northwest Baltimore. Mia was a survival sex worker, and she'd been arrested twice before. This was for allegedly selling her body for sex. Regardless of having a wealthy, famous brother, she just might have been too proud to ask him for handouts. A neighbor who lived in the area Mia was working said she had looked out her window around 5 a.m. and she saw Mia duck into an alleyway with a light-skinned black man. The man was wearing a white t-shirt, a white baseball cap, and blue jeans. The neighbor said that the man was looking around as though he were nervous. An hour later at 6 a.m., Mia's body was found. She'd been stabbed to death. That same neighbor who witnessed Mia walking into the alleyway with the sketchy-looking man had said she had seen Mia in the same spot many times in the early morning hours for months leading up to her death. After Mia's autopsy report came back, the medical examiner found DNA from a potential suspect under her fingernails. Police arrested and charged a 42-year-old very dark-skinned man named Sean Oliver with Mia's murder. Sean ended up going to trial, and even though it seemed that the prosecutor had an airtight case against him, especially with Sean's DNA under Mia's fingernails, the DNA was easily explained away by Sean. He told the court that the night before, he and Mia had consensual sex. Phone records seemed to confirm what Sean was claiming. The jury acquitted him of Mia's murder. And with Sean no longer a suspect for Mia's murder, her case went cold. The day Reggie Bullock received the news of Mia's murder, he took to social media to mourn the loss of his brother Kevin. Critics came down hard on him for using Mia's dead name and non-preferred pronouns. But since this, Reggie has used his platform to speak out in favor of the LGBTQ community, and especially trans folk. And as a side, tragedy hit again for Reggie Bullock in 2019. He lost yet another sister in Baltimore. 22-year-old Keosha was also murdered. Rest in power, Mia and Keosha. Again, this was CJ from Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ. And I want you to know you matter. Remember, it's not a crime to be gay, bi, trans, or to live your truth. Unless you're a murderer.
Here to heat things up even more is the mother-daughter duo from Murder and Mimosas, who sip mimosas and hone their investigative skills each week.
Welcome to Murder Mimosas. I'm Danica. And I'm Shannon. Today we are part of a collaboration talking about the summertime, and we decided to pick out a case that has been cold for quite a while and could use the heat to bring it back to life. We're going to talk about Robin Farnsworth.
So Robin was from the little town I graduated from in Bon Aub, Arkansas. She was a 15-year-old mother. She had a little girl when she went missing. She was, I think I said she's 15, but she was 15 at the time. Her mother happened to call her in missing about 4 days later, and they felt like she was a runaway because she had ran away before. And the police didn't really look into it. They just felt like she was a runaway. They didn't do anything they really should have done. And there wasn't really anything said about it until around March, when 2 boys were arrested on another charge. While they were arrested or sitting in jail, one of the young men, Donnie Temple, gave a statement to the jailer stating that he knew what happened to Robin, that Derek Grubbs, who was 18 at the time, had taken him out to a barn and showed him that Robin had been beaten, that he'd beat her and covered her with newspaper. The police did go out to the barn and they found decomposition and a purple fingernail, but they never found the body at that time. And that was all they did. They never looked any further for her at that time.
In 1997, a hunter who was just a mile or so away from his home came across the remains of what was clearly a human skull with the jaw detached. He contacted the police to let them know, because he also found very small shoes, which he thought was a child's shoe. Very little was told to him at that time. He didn't hear much about it then. One officer did tell him that it was likely the remains of Robin Farnsworth from 2 years previous, since this was the same general area where Donnie had given a statement to the jailer about Robin's body being. Despite the hunter keeping an eye on the news, checking the newspaper, nothing really was said about the remains that he found. Now, it wasn't full remains, but there was definitely enough for them to do some sort of testing. In March of 2003, just 3 years after leadership changed within the department, unclaimed and unlabeled box was found in the evidence room. When it was opened, there were bones inside. Again, it was unclear whose they could be because there was nothing labeling these or tying them to any open cases. They sent the bones off to have them tested, and it ended up being those of Robin Farnsworth. They had been unidentified remains for many years. Family had no idea that she had, in fact, been found. It was just very heartbreaking for family and the loved ones of Robin, especially her brother and her daughter, who all this time had no information about where her mother had gone, if she had in fact just ran away, or if something sinister had happened.
Fact, didn't her mother think that she had seen Robin at times?
Yes. So when Donnie, you talked about his statement to the jailer, they spoke to Robin's mother, who claimed that she saw Robin after the time that Donnie had claimed to see Robin's body in the barn. And since they, at the time that he gave his statement, was unable to find any evidence to confirm or deny, they really didn't take it any further. But it seems that, considering we were talking feet away from where Donnie claimed to have seen Robin's body as where her remains were found, that he was likely correct. But the sad thing is, despite this, there have been no arrests made and no real investigation done. Robin's family still has no idea what happened to Robin or had any justice in her death. An extremely sad event. Her daughter is grown and does not have any answer. She has pleaded on local television. Robin's brother has also pleaded on local television. He has made statements to newspapers. He even wrote an article asking for answers. The family feels that the only way this case will be solved is if someone who knows something becomes tired of holding their secret. The scary part is the person that is heavily under suspicion, Derek Grubbs, is now available to have parole because of a change in 2013 with the Supreme Court. He was a minor at the time that he was convicted on another crime, so he went from life in prison with no parole to the possibility of parole. That possibility is coming soon, and it would be scary if he maybe had the hand in Robin's murder for him to walk. There's a whole lot more to Robin's case and the case that is tied to hers, Kenyatta's. I'm currently working on a book, No Immediate Cause, about the two young girls' cases and the possible link that may bind them together. If you would like to follow us on social media, Murder and Mimosas, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever it is called now, and TikTok, you can keep up with the release of the book so that you can read in depth about this and come to your own conclusion. Could Derek have had a hand in Robin's death like he did Kenyatta's? Or is Robin the victim of someone completely different?
Allison and Maggie from Coffee and Cases like their coffee hot and their cases cold, but they're focused on bringing light to lesser known cases to let families know they are never alone.
Hello from Coffee and Cases True Crime Podcast, where we like our coffee hot and our cases cold. I'm Allison.
And I'm Maggie, and you can check out new episodes of our podcast every Thursday on your favorite podcasting app to hear coverage of many lesser-known cases that are screaming for justice just like this one. If you would like to hear our full coverage of this case, make sure to check out Coffee and Cases Podcast, episode 235, Mary and Susie Raker.
Maggie, you know, as I do, that the earmark for the end of summer in our minds as teachers is when the school year starts back.
Oh, I'm already having like the back to school nightmares. Oh, I forgot to make copies on the first
Right.
day.
Oh,
Like,
no.
happening.
The copier is broken.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, on Labor Day, September 2nd of 1974 in St. Cloud, Minnesota, 15-year-old Mary Raker was about to do just that. She attended an all-girls high school out of town, and they were to start back to school the next day. She was getting everything together that she would need before she was to ride with another friend and that friend's family on the 45-minute drive to St. Francis High School in Little Falls that afternoon, where Mary would be a sophomore. Mary had actually spent quite a bit of her time that summer with her grandparents, who lived in the nearby town of Luxembourg. And Mary's parents, they could see some changes in Mary. There really is a marked move from child to young adult, I think, from ages 13 really to 15 for
And
Mary.
I think it can be hard for parents to come to grips with that. I know, like, my mother-in-law always says about Anthony, she put him to bed at 12, and then when he woke up at 13, she was like, who is this human that I have in my house?
Yeah.
And so I think it's kind of hard for parents when kids start to change into a young adult instead of that child.
Yeah. Mary's parents worried, I think as we all do, like you said, if the changes were normal teenage ones or if there was something deeper going on with Mary. Her mother told a reporter from CBS News, quote, "I knew something wasn't right, but she wasn't saying what it was," end quote. Despite any growing pains or concerns, the family had actually spent a wonderful day on September 1st at a family reunion. The majority of the supplies had actually already been purchased for Mary to start school. In fact, it does sound like Mary's mother, Rita, believed, at least, that she had purchased everything that Mary needed already. And this last day before Mary was to go off to school, Rita actually was expecting that Mary would be helping a little bit around the house before making that drive. And it was likely a bit frustrating when Mary bounded into the room and insisted that she needed to go back to the department store, Zayre's, to not only pick out a winter coat, but also to get a few more school supplies before
prepared.
leaving. Yeah.
She wants to be prepared.
She just wants the extra.
Mm-hmm.
The shopping center where Zayre's was located at 33rd Avenue and Division Street was about a mile walk from the Raker home. While Mary was only one of the Rakers' 6 children, it was only Mary's younger 12-year-old sister, Suzanne, who was called Susie or Sue by friends and family, who decided to go with her to the store. It actually makes sense to me, the importance of, like we were saying, just the right school supplies, especially for students who loved school, and it seems like they did. According to an article for WJON.com, Mary wanted to be a teacher, and 12-year-old Susie, who was learning to play the violin, had dreams.
Susie.
I know, had dreams to be a doctor when she grew up.
Also good for Susie.
Yeah, so as they ran out the door to the store, they waved goodbye to their father, Fred, who was painting the family's home. So everybody's busy this day. Mom Rita told CBS News, quote, "They left about 11:15 from what I recall that morning. They said they would be back early." Rita actually received a phone call from that family who was supposed to drive Mary to school, telling her that instead of them leaving during the early afternoon around 4 p.m., they would be heading to school just after dinner around 7 p.m. So a little bit of a delay. And that news was perfect for Rita because that would give Mary plenty of time to go to Zayre's store and then come home and still be able to help out before leaving. However, since Mary wasn't there for Mom Rita to tell her the news right away, the phone call obviously was soon forgotten. Mary would obviously be back with plenty of time for Rita to let her know later. But the time when Mary was originally set to leave came and went. But Mary and Susie didn't return home.
And that's quite a bit of time. That's like 5 hours.
Right. And as far as Mary knew, she was supposed to leave for school around 4.
Mm-hmm.
Soon it was dinner time. Still no sign of her daughters. Rita and her husband Frank grew extremely concerned. Rita told WJON.com, quote, "I remember fixing supper that evening, and we generally ate around 5 o'clock, and when they weren't there, we knew something was wrong," end quote. This was not like her children. So it makes sense, as Rita later told CBS News, quote, "When it got to be 6:30, 7 p.m., my husband went to the police department to report that they were missing."
Yeah, because like we said, that's a bit of time already.
Right. And remember that this was 1974, Maggie. So you can likely guess the police perspective on the report.
Oh, they ran away.
Mm-hmm. Per an APM Reports article published October 11th, 2016, and written by Jennifer Vogel and Madeline Barron, quote, "Fred and Rita had a hard time getting the case taken seriously by the St. Cloud Police Department, which believed the girls had simply run away, and later the Stearns County Sheriff's Office, which was in the middle of an election. It just seemed we couldn't move the powers that be," Raker said. "So family members searched on their own. We were very frustrated at that time and angry about the whole thing," end quote.
That's such a common theme for episodes or cases, rather, that we have covered. I just feel like maybe lives could be saved if we took things seriously from the get-go.
Right. And what is the problem with taking things more seriously?
Exactly.
Eventually, even though there were many mistakes that have long been noted about the investigation, some additional details were discovered. Here are some of the gaps that have been filled in thanks to sightings of Mary and Susie. A manager at a Shopko store saw Mary and Susie right before noon. An hour later, around 1 to 1:30 p.m. or just after, a neighborhood boy named Jacob Younger ran into the two girls in Zayres.
Which makes sense because they left like around 11.
Yes. And it's a mile away.
Mm-hmm.
So that takes a little bit of time to walk. As the two girls continued on, he saw them headed toward the grocery section of Zayre, which from the descriptions in my mind sounds a lot like a Walmart because it had groceries, clothing,
yeah,
and all kinds of other goods.
I was picturing a Sears, like an old-timey Sears.
Does Sears have groceries?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Maybe. That's just what's in your head.
Yeah.
Yeah. The grocery section of the store was closed for the holiday. Remember, this was Labor Day. But
interesting.
The section with winter coats could be accessed by walking through the grocery section. So that the details of that sighting, plus it being by a neighbor who knew the girls, made sense, and that sighting is trusted. So we at least know their whereabouts until around 1:30-ish. But there was something that Jacob Younger overheard bits and pieces of in a private conversation between Mary and Susie that haunted him after their disappearance. Younger told a reporter with the Minneapolis Star in 1977 that he heard 12-year-old Susie say to her older sister Mary something like, quote, "I don't want to go with that man. I don't like him. Let's not," end quote.
Oh.
As Jacob Younger was leaving the store himself, he noticed a nervous-looking man outside the store.
Gives me chill bumps.
Well, here's the thing, though. Whether this is the man that Susie was referring to is unknown. Photographs as well as bulletins were sent out, according to WJON files, to, quote, all major cities in 5 upper Midwest states and to every state crime bureau, end quote. So even though there's a lot written about bungling the investigation, at least some information was shared.
Conveyed early on.
Yeah. Descriptions of the two girls and what they were last seen wearing. Mary in jeans, an army fatigue jacket with Raker on the front pocket, and her green wire rim glasses, and Susie in blue corduroy pants, a short white cotton jacket, and gold wire-rimmed glasses were also distributed. Then the days and the weeks passed, Maggie, with no additional words or details. The girls were seen in Zayre's, and then nothing that we can verify. And it saddens me that the Raker family, who had just celebrated a reunion, was now so disjointed. Just shy of 4 weeks after the girls' disappearance, the family received additional news around 2 p.m. on September 28th, 1974. 2 teenage boys had been in the quarry area near Waite Park and had stumbled upon a body. The body that was discovered was 12-year-old Susie's body. Again, this was around 2 p.m. When police responded, they found her fully clothed, but her body had been placed under a bush in some tall grass about 13 yards from the quarry. She had been stabbed 13 times.
Wow.
Yes. In surveying the area, police also located clothing, but the clothing wasn't Susie's. It was clothing that matched Mary's outfit that she was last seen wearing. Obviously, they know we've got to do more in-depth searching in this area, and after searching the waters below, that is where they located around 6 p.m. that same day, 40 feet below the surface of the water, 15-year-old Mary's body as well. Mary, found nude, had been stabbed 6 times.
So very violent ends these girls met.
Very. Neither girl had defensive wounds. And because of decomposition, investigators were unable to tell whether either girl had been sexually assaulted. Of the clothing collected, they found Mary's pants and underwear on the cliffs of the quarry in a way that led them to believe that the perpetrator had tried to throw them into the water below as well.
Which makes me think maybe there was some type of assault.
Her bra had been cut off of her and cut into 4 pieces. Rita Raker told St. Cloud Times reporter David Unz, quote, "We definitely went through all those emotions of just fear, first of all, because we didn't know who it was, and then anger that so little seemed to be done at the time, and it seemed like nobody knew what to do," end quote. One thing was clear now, though, Maggie. Passing off the girl's disappearance as a runaway situation could no longer be an excuse. Now they needed a real and thorough investigation. With this revised focus, Maggie, if you got chills before, a chilling discovery was made in a place that was right under everyone's noses the whole time. Mary's diary.
Stop it.
She had written the following message, quote, "Should I die, I ask that my stuffed animals be given to my sister. And if I am murdered, see that justice wins over. I have a few reasons to fear for my life. What I ask is important," end quote.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So that tells you this was not something that was
sudden,
a random attack.
Yeah, random.
Or Bruce Bechtold, the Stearns County Sheriff's Chief Deputy in 2016, told a reporter from TwinCities.com, quote, "It's pretty significant to look at that. You certainly can't rule that out because what 15-year-old girl writes that?" End quote. Mom Rita Raker told Fox 9, quote, "She wrote it to our family, and she said, 'See that justice wins over.' That's hard. That was my child," end quote.
I mean, my jaw's on the floor.
And especially since so much time would pass without any convictions, without any justice. Struggles would continue to plague the investigation. Some of those noted by CARE 11 include lost police reports, evidence kept in detectives' desks rather than in evidence, and suspect names which were given to police who were never interviewed at all. And in all the years since, there hasn't been enough evidence to charge anyone with the crime. But that doesn't mean that there aren't theories based on the investigation over the last 50 years that gives us hope for answers.
To hear the rest of the case, including information about the investigation and those theories, check out Coffee and Cases podcast. Until then, stay together.
And stay safe. Bringing us to a close is Dawn from Method and Madness podcast, where pursuit of the truth takes center stage, exploring every angle with intense dedication to immersive storytelling, insight, and advocacy.
Kristen stepped outside the trailer into the hot, humid August night, closing the door behind her. She headed toward the road. It was dark, around 11:30 p.m., with only the soft, glowing light from nearby homes guiding her way and a blanket of stars above. As the grass met the roadway, Kristen placed a bare foot onto the pavement. There was no smooth, white sidewalk, and the pebbles were rough under her feet as she walked on the side of Route 139 in the rural town of Ovid, New York. She was dressed in a red and white striped, sleeveless sweater and white capri pants. To her right, a few modest houses. To her left, a cornfield. The headlights from oncoming traffic would momentarily blind her as they passed by. It wasn't a heavily trafficked road. Most of the passerby at that time of night were driving home from work at the nearby Army Depot or from Willard Asylum. Some were headed to the local bar for a nightcap. A few witnesses and those passing cars later said they saw the 20-year-old woman walking on the side of the road. She didn't appear to be in distress. One local man reported that he saw a green or blue car pull up next to Kristen, as if stopping to chat with her. Behind it was another car. Just after midnight, Kristen had turned around and was walking back toward the trailer. Witnesses later said they saw two men in their 20s, walking about 50 yards behind her. Who those two men were, who owned the green or blue car, is still a mystery nearly 39 years later. Kristen never made it back to the trailer that night, and nobody else came forward saying they saw anything. At least one person heard what they described as a blood-curdling scream coming from near the cornfield after midnight. It took until the next afternoon for Kristen to be reported missing by the young man she'd been visiting that week. The New York State Police called Kristen's parents back in Minnesota, and her younger brother, Kyle, remembers painfully how his mother, Phyllis, upon hearing that her daughter was missing, cried out, "She's dead. I know it." Kristen's father, Mike, immediately took a flight to New York and joined the search for his only daughter. That Friday, 2 days after Kristen had taken her walk, she was found. Firefighters, police, and volunteers had combed the area and found Kristen's body in that cornfield adjacent to the very road she'd walked on the night of August 14th, 1985. She was naked with multiple stab wounds. She'd put up quite a fight, but was no match for whoever she came across that night. It was a shock to the residents of the tiny village in the Finger Lakes region of New York State. How did a 20-year-old woman from out of town end up murdered, left in a cornfield? Why was she out walking so late at night, and why wasn't she wearing shoes? Kristen came from a loving family of 4. Their suburban home was outside Minneapolis, in Burnsville, Minnesota. Kristen was a visitor to Ovid, hoping to strike up a romance with the young man she'd met just 5 months earlier while visiting Captiva Island in Florida on spring break. Jim Vermeersch was a 19-year-old who was working down in Captiva temporarily, and after corresponding with Kristen for months, he invited her to his parents' home in Ovid, New York that summer. It promised to be a fun week in the sun, swimming, fishing, barbecues. But nothing went according to plan. When Kristen arrived in Ovid on August 12, 1985, she was surprised to find out she wouldn't be staying with Jim at his family home. Instead, he'd recently rented out a trailer located next to a local bar, the Golden Buck, and the two were going to stay there for the week. Kristen was a sport and embraced her surroundings, though she was immediately left confused and hurt when Jim spent most of his time working and telling her he'd taken on extra shifts. 2 days into Kristen's stay, she used a payphone at the Golden Buck and called her mom back home, telling her she was cutting her trip short. Phyllis O'Connell didn't pry, but wishes to this day that she had. Later that night, Jim and several of his friends sat drinking and smoking pot inside the trailer. Kristen, feeling ignored and wondering why she'd been invited out there in the first place, spoke with one of the party guests and was told that Jim had at least one girlfriend there in Ovid. Kristen was known to take night walks, and it wasn't unusual for her to do so that night. She left the trailer to get some air and clear her head, and intended on returning. All of her belongings, including her purse, suitcase, and shoes, were back at the trailer. Who did she encounter that night during her walk? Who would want to harm this beautiful, kind young woman? After Kristen's body was found, police said they ruled out Jim and his friends as suspects, despite the fact that none of them called the police until she'd been missing for over 13 hours. Rumors began swirling around the tiny rural village, and to this day, they still do. Was Kristen's murder the result of her having seen something she shouldn't have? Murmurs of a drug business that ran from Captiva Island up to Ovid led skeptics to wonder if Kristen, who was always on the straight and narrow, had unknowingly walked into a questionable situation. Or was it jealousy, a green-eyed monster who saw the Brooke Shields look-alike as a threat? Another theory was that Kristen was killed by 3 local men, known as the Pig Roasters. On the night of Kristen's murder, before anyone even knew she was missing, a local woman said she'd been sitting at a table in her kitchen when her stepbrother and his friends came home, covered in blood, but they claimed it was from slaughtering a pig for a pig roast. As of 2024, there have been several lead investigators that have had Kristen's case. Advocates have pleaded with New York State Police to use an outside forensics lab to test the evidence that was found in the cornfield, Kristen's clothing, and the hairs that were found. Kristen's mother, Phyllis O'Connell, is now 84 years old. She tells me personally, nearly every week, that she just wants to know, before she dies, who is responsible.
I vowed that after she was found there, that I would never rest, never, until I find out who did this to her and who killed her. This, I just can't believe if anybody really knew her, they would have killed her.
This case was brought to you by Method and Madness, a true crime podcast. I'm Dawn, and you can listen to this show on your favorite podcast platform. Find more at methodandmadnesspodcast.com. Thank you.
And that concludes our special series called Hot Pursuit. These stories have taken us through the grueling efforts of those who refuse to let the flames of justice die out. From summer crimes to cold cases, the pursuit of justice is a journey that demands resilience and determination.
A heartfelt thank you to all the podcasters who contributed to this collaboration. Your dedication to uncovering information about and to sharing these stories is truly inspiring.
Remember, the pursuit of justice doesn't end with us. And if any of the cases we've discussed resonate with you, share the stories, spread the word, and keep the search for truth alive.
Stay connected with our podcasters by liking and following their shows, which are listed in our show notes. Thank you for joining us on this journey.
Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, and remember that together we can keep the fire of justice burning brightly.